Good evening, everyone. Am I on? Okay. Noise here. And welcome to the Monday, May 18, 2026 Planning Board meeting. We have a quorum. We are missing two members this evening, but 4 constitutes a quorum, so we are good to go. The meeting agenda stands as posted. I know of no changes. You have Jim's meeting notes. Has everybody had a chance to look at them? Any questions or comments? I have a motion. Pardon?
We accept.
Thank you, Ed. A second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed, abstention, motion carries. We have in draft form the May 4th minutes. Any corrections or additions?
We accept.
Second, please. Second. All those in favor? Opposed, abstention, motion carries. I have no correspondence or announcements. Does anyone else? All right, then we will take up the first new application this evening, which is that of Elizabeth Grammaticus, 41 Hook Road, site plan review and wetlands permit for renovation and additions.
Good evening, how are you all doing? Thank you for taking the time tonight. My name is Elsa Palace. I'm an architect with the Art of Building, here representing Liz Grammaticus. This project is approximately a 5-acre parcel. It is at the corner of London Lane and Hook Road, directly east of the Mutterkill, which is going to be a defining characteristic of the site, which you'll see in the next slide. The site is characterized by wetlands, and it is also, as you can see, a corner lot, and of note is that little triangle in the middle, which is the only as-of-right buildable area on the lot. The site is already developed. It has a historic house, a historic barn, and a 20th century garage that are all kind of clustered down near Hook Road. Next slide. Here you can see a little bit of our proposed site plan. The house is sort of right in that rectangle there. We're proposing a small addition on the left side and a small addition on the western side. And in addition, some retaining walls to the north and a small retaining wall to the south.
Use this pointer, second button down.
Great.
You have to hold it.
Perfect. Okay. This is an interesting thing to note here, which is that the largest addition that we're proposing is in an area of the site that's already been fairly heavily developed. This is this existing 20th century garage. This is the existing parking area and an existing patio, and then this is the existing historic house. The wetlands are, this is the line of the wetlands here, so you can see that the entire site, or at least the entire sort of area of field here is within the wetlands buffer. This is just a diagram showing the existing structures as they are today. These are some images of the structures, so these 4 right here are of the historic home. This is the Hook Road facing street facade. This northern facade is worth noting. It currently has some not very attractive vinyl doors and windows on it. And this is where we're proposing one series of small bay window additions. This is the other facade off of which we're proposing an addition, which is a single-story gable roofed addition. Sitting right here. We're not proposing any work on this eastern facade, nor are we really proposing any work on the existing facade, the south facade. This is the existing garage building, and this is the existing historic barn. We're not proposing any work to either of those structures. This is a diagram of our proposed work. So again, you can see this is the larger addition off the western facade, and these are the 2 smaller additions off of the northern facade. And these are basically like extended bay windows that are sort of united under a single half-hip roof. Here you can see that this is a recently flagged updated boundary for the wetlands. We had this done in April, and so you can see this line here, and then this sort of light green shaded area is a 100-foot wetlands buffer. You can see that all of the existing buildings are within this buffer, as are proposed additions. However, what we're proposing is not actually within the wetlands; it's just within the buffer. And again, we're trying to concentrate our work sort of within a heavily developed area of the site. The plan on top is the existing first floor plan, and the second plan down on the bottom of the page is the proposed first floor plan. Our intent with the architectural design for this project was to keep the additions as minimal and sort of respectful of the existing historic architecture as possible. So we proposed this bay addition off of the living room, this bay addition off of the kitchen, and then this mudroom, hallway, bathroom addition off of the existing living room. The bay window additions really are about trying to open up the floor plate. It's currently fairly dark, and our client really loves the views to the north of the wetlands. So we were trying to find a way to sort of crack the house open a little bit to accentuate those views and get some more light into the floor plate. And then the proposed addition over here is really just about giving her some functionality. We're not really proposing any work on the second floor except for replacing some fixtures and finishes in the existing bathroom. In our pre-application conference, concern was raised about the possibility of the proposed mudroom being used as a bedroom in the future. So we put together these diagrams to show that that's not really feasible. So this is a queen size bed right here. These are two different layouts for possibilities for a twin size bed. One of the things that we're planning to do in this space is to do some pretty intense built-ins, two built-in closets with a built-in window seat between them, a stacked washer dryer and a surround with a folding countertop and some shelving. So unless someone were to rip all of that improvement out of this space, it would be pretty hard to get any kind of circulation path around the bed in this room. These are elevations of the house. So the area that is shaded this light gray color is the existing, and then this in this elevation is the proposed. We're trying very hard again to keep the massing diminutive and to sort of echo the existing language on the historic house. So we're replicating the roofing material, replicating the windows, replicating the shutters here, and also the siding reveal and corner boards. This is the western facade, so here you can see this little mudroom addition right here. This is the north facade with the two bay window additions here and here. And our intent with the architecture here was to basically, in historic houses of this vintage, you wouldn't have seen ganged windows, but again, we were trying to pull light and air into the floor plate. So we were looking at historic porches and trying to sort of rip off of the language of a historic porch to try to get her some bigger openings into the floor plate. And then this is the eastern facade. We're not really proposing much here, but you can see this is the side of the bay window addition. For lighting fixtures, our client is like a real old house nerd, and she, years before she even conceptualized doing this project, had started collecting some fixtures. So these are some fixtures she's already collected. They're all fully covered on top and sort of replicate like a historic lantern fixture, and our intent is to install them underneath overhangs in order to help with dark skies compliance. And then this is a proposed fixture that follows the same logic. In terms of windows, so our client has been working for the past several years with white clay kiln preservation to have all of the existing historic windows on the house restored, which is really cool. We are hoping to source historic units that match the existing historic units on the house. We haven't yet figured out if we're going to be able to do that, and we're still trying to put that window package together. If we're not able to use actual historic units, we're proposing to use more of an ultimate wood double hung units with simulated divided lights and an OG stick-in profile to replicate the historic units as much as possible. These are the exterior doors that we're proposing. So again, kind of with the same logic, we're attempting to locate actual historic reclaimed units to use on the house. This door right here, which would be installed in the southern sort of Main Street facing facade, we've already located and purchased in the process of restoring. We have not located these units, but the hope is to find some historic Dutch doors. The landscape, basically the sort of like broad intent of the approach to landscape is to use native plantings, to use them really sparingly, and any hardscape that we're doing, we're trying to keep it as feeling old and sort of appropriate to the age of the house as possible. Of note is this section right here. So currently the site really kind of like drops off dramatically from her back door. So one of the intents of this project is to give her a little bit of sort of flat grade outside of her back door, and then to step the landscape down a little bit more gently. And our tactic for doing this is to install these sort of like terraced like planting beds, basically. And these would have retaining walls that would be flush at grade on the southern side, and then have about a 15-inch exposure on the northern side. So they wouldn't be visible from the street. They really only be visible if you were standing here looking back up at the house. This right here is a landscape section of what that would look like. And then this is a detail of sort of what we're proposing for this first retaining wall right here. The rest we're hoping to use just the big office. This is just a sort of schematic sketch. The other thing that we're proposing to do with the landscape is to add some deciduous trees as a sort of like site buffer along the road. The house is actually quite close to the street, so we're hoping to give it a little bit of a screen. We're also proposing to add a deciduous tree right here, which we would hope would sort of block some of the view from this new addition to her parking area. These are some schematic views. This one from Brook Road, showing these new screening plantings that we're proposing, and this one from the parking area, again showing some screening. And then the sort of look and feel of the landscape, again, it's very, like we want it to look like it's been here for 200 years, and to be very soft and sort of native feeling. I don't know if we need to go into these. We have some supporting documents that we submitted. This is an archaeological assessment letter, basically saying that they've reviewed the site and they think that the area of the site that we're hoping to build on has probably been developed enough over many decades and centuries, but we don't think there's going to be anything found there, so we don't think it's significant. And we've also been working with Kate Wood, who is a historic preservationist on this project, and she's helped us develop our approach to the architecture. We also have an updated survey, which we've submitted, and a site plan from our civil engineer.
So one thing I don't think you mentioned, or maybe I missed it, was the New York State DEC jurisdictional determination, and that the state has taken jurisdiction of these wetlands. So I don't know if you can explain where you are in the process with that.
Yeah, so the state did take jurisdiction of the wetlands, and they've sent someone out to, or they're planning to send someone out to take a look at them, but they haven't been out yet for their site visit.
So as the board knows, we'll have to wait and see what the determination is in the DEC in coordination with the efforts discussed here on what we end up there. It is interesting, I didn't know it earlier, but I guess I put it as an update that DEC did come out with some clarifying language of where things stand since the law was repealed by the court in Albany. They did come out and now say the jurisdictional determination still stands, but now they're using the originally mapped wetlands and not the new mapped wetlands for determinations and how they're going to move forward. So we're still going through the process, but it's the old maps, not the new ones. And they're all kind of reference maps, they're not super specific. So we have a little more guidance, but that whole process is kind of in flux and things to pay attention as we go. I noted my notes, and we talked about this, the driveway will require sign off by the highway department.
So we actually, since our meeting, amended the plan. We're no longer planning to extend to the driveway as we proposed in our initial meeting.
You're not making any changes to the road that touches the road?
Yeah.
This is all just going to remain the same, no material?
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments, we'll have to discuss the boot room in a second. The landscape sketches, so you gave us a site plan with the landscaping on it, and we have the sketches and we have all these details. We do typically ask for a materials list, so the actual trees and the materials that you can have for the retaining wall and any stepping stones you're going to put down and things like that. So in your landscape plan, we want to know just kind of what all those materials are going to be and have a materials list.
So planning's in place.
And I think my last comment just comes down to the boot room. We did discuss this in the pre-conference meeting. This is why this slide is here.
Did you skip over the food?
Oh, no, yeah, I'll get to it, yeah. I won't do that one, thank you. Yeah, so let me back up to get a bigger discussion. These plans show the approximate location of the septic system, which where was it? Let's see, right here. So I made a comment, I think during the pre-con, I did put it in my notes that it shows the approximate location of the existing septic area. I didn't see any notes on the plans about field locating this. We're actually locating it. There's quite a bit of work going in here. So as we discussed with most projects, when you have a lot of material, if there's machinery or things going back in here, we are concerned that it doesn't go over any of the existing septic lines or any of the fields or anything. I'm not sure if it's like say it's a pit or a field. So I think we would want it, if they're not going to be identified here, and you guys and the contractors and the board in particular are comfortable with it being field located, I think something like that note needs to be put on here because we just don't want to end up with something getting broken in a mess after the fact because we've got some serious kids or something going in and break some lines or sink into a septic field. So a little more clarification on that I think would be useful. And then the board will decide if they're comfortable with what we see regarding that. And then that does tie into my last comment, which was the boot room. When we originally looked at this in the pre-conference meeting, we discussed the fact that we thought that this could be considered essentially to be a standalone bedroom. You've got a room here, a bathroom, and a hall with I think there's 1 or 2 steps up into the living room here. So it looked like this had the potential to be a bedroom. That is why now I guess we do have this sketch in here to kind of show you their concept of what may or may not have, but I do think the board still needs to discuss whether or not you think this could be used as a bedroom. And if so, then that would tie back into the whole discussion of the septic tank. This would have to go to, and septic, I should say, this would have to go back to Dutchess County Planning for any discussion of whether or not the existing septic was adequate if we were to say there was a bedroom to be had. So this is I guess the big discussion point from my perspective, and that's everything I have.
Any board members?
What are the dimensions of that bedroom?
It's not a bedroom, it's a mudroom. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I think it's, it's like less than 10 feet in the long direction. I think it's about 12 by 9, approximately, and I can confirm that.
I think an important consideration is whether or not it's over the 70 square foot of usable floor space.
I believe it is, okay, that's an interesting point. I believe that the overall footprint of the space is right around 70 square feet, we checked it, but if you take into account the millwork that we're proposing, it is less than the 70.
And that would encroach on that usable floor space.
The millwork isn't maybe very, very, very desirable, but it isn't necessary.
Mudroom, it's necessary. I mean, we're sort of proposing it in lieu of, sheetrock closets. It's a bigger investment than sheetrock closets, and it's something that she wants to do for aesthetics. If we were proposing sheetrock walls and closets, I don't know if this would even be a question. But, if we're talking about a space that you're concerned someone might someday retrofit, or, if she were to sell a house and come in and change, the investment that she's going to be making in this millwork is actually significantly higher than building a couple of walls that's long to take out. So. She also has no plans to sell this house in the so.
Eventually it will change hands.
Always good.
What is off to the side? Is that a walk-up slider or what is that?
So that's a swing door, it would swing inwards. And you can see in these diagrams it would hit the bottom of the bed.
And you can also enter the room from the living room?
You can enter it, there's a hallway to the right. Thank you.
Faster.
Try to
Figure out what we're doing.
Yeah, so the living room, there are 2 steps down into this hallway, which would just, again, have one large storage on the northern wall, and then you walk through a cased opening into this mudroom.
The doors that you showed, that you want to use as reclaimed, those would be for where? Here and...
And the new one there, yep. And then one into the foyer on the southern elevation.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, but you had said that there weren't going to be any changes to that facade.
That's true. We are proposing to replace that front door, which is not historic. It's not original to the house.
Um, What's the condition of the landscaping behind the house where all that terracing is proposed?
Currently, it's like a crazy slope. It's actually quite dangerous. It's a big slope, and she has like a little step. Actually, yeah, if you go to the photos, yeah. So that northern facade photo, I know it's in shadow, so it's sort of hard to see, but it's a very, very steep slope down.
There?
Yeah. And she's already put in some of these sort of like informal planting beds, which is basically the language that we're hoping to replicate. We just want to scoot it off the facade a little bit more so that she has more of a flat landing zone before that slope starts.
Are there going to be any provided drainage, like French drains or anything to divert water?
We hadn't talked about that. I don't know if it's going to be necessary. She has downleaders. I'm not sure. I don't think the downleaders are tying into anything right now. You can see in these photos that they kind of come down off the corners of the house and lean out a little bit. We would obviously, grade. It wouldn't be flat top. It would be graded so that drainage would kind of flow down. But I don't think we would need a French drain on the foundation. We don't want to touch the foundation as much as possible.
So this is a slope that's well within the 100-foot buffer around the DEC wetland, and that try to be very sparing about development within the buffer. There has to be a really compelling reason why the project won't succeed without that, and this seems kind of like something elective.
What are you referring to?
All of the terracing. So you've got a wetland buffer around a DEC wetland, and in order to construct it, you're going to have a lot of heavy equipment moving that's within, stone's throw of the bank of the wetland. And then once it's finished, it changes the dynamic of how water exits the site and enters the wetland.
And what is the terrain like there?
I'd actually like to push back against that point a little bit. I don't think it does change the existing dynamic of what's going on with the water right now. Currently, water's coming down off the roof, it's getting caught by the downleaders and kicking out on the corners, and it's already flowing straight down. We would just be sort of modulating the rate at which it flows. If you go to the, can you go up? Let's take a look at the lower one. This one. Can I use your picture? So these are the topo lines that we're proposing. You can see it kind of pushes the rate out a little bit more. The existing topo is basically doing this. So you can see there's like this is a 2-foot contour line, so there's a steep drop right here, right outside the back of the house. So water currently is coming down off the side of the house and flowing out here and out here. We're proposing kind of the same thing, but having just a jump force that goes back in this direction. I think it's all wrong.
Just for reference, the DEC will be reviewing this today, but concerns they certainly will raise.
Yeah.
We actually are already having this.
Look at the number plan. Okay, and I see the washer dryer. And what's the other rectangular object?
That is for cat's litter box, which was a defining object of this entire project, to find a spot for her cat's litter box. So it would be below a holding counter.
And it's a pull down, right? So it's a
It is,
shower enclosure.
yeah, it has a standing shower and a 24-inch sink.
Was there any discussion about not having the shower stall there, just having it as a powder room?
Yeah, we did talk about it, but I think she felt like it was useful when we were in the sort of initial design planning phases of the project. She didn't want it to get an extra in the house in case she ever gets into stay. Because right now, if you go to the next slide, the only bathroom in the house currently is up on the 2nd floor. And it's very central, but not great when she has people come to stay with her.
Going back to mine. Melody, what was your thinking on the built-in closets of wood? That they were removable? Is that what you were thinking? And somehow we could make them smaller because they were removable?
No, I know they're not proposed to be removable, they're proposed to be built in, but if they weren't there, there were closets there would obviously make the usable space large enough for half their beds. If we just raised it as, and it's triggered particularly because of the full bathroom there, you know, that we could, that's the operative word, could. I know it's not her intention, but we have to just explore the question of this could be, all of that stuff could be removed, and could this be a useful bedroom? That's just the purpose of the conversation. And we even talked about, I believe is it an opening from the hall to the, is that the living room, kitchen, what is it?
Yes, it's a living room.
So there's no door there.
There is no door there.
So you could take the door off the, what they're calling the boot room, and put it on the living room wall.
Well, so currently,
Right.
thank you. Currently, there is no door separating this space from this space. So there's no door here, it's just an opening, and there's no door here, it's also just an opening.
Well, that makes a difference to me.
I agree with you,
Yeah,
Jeff.
room without a door.
Again, I don't think we have really clear distinction between, you know, what makes a bedroom and what
Right.
doesn't.
It has to be
Like Melody says, you would have to go to the trouble of taking the cabinets out. You don't have to file for that. You know, if you're doing demolition and, you know, making a lot of interior changes, there would be a future filing that would then come with that same review as it could be usable as a bedroom. But just taking cabinets off the wall is different from, I don't know, taking doors up and down is also pretty easy.
Well, I mean, realistically, we know, the reason we're asking, we know that in the future, interior changes can happen to houses without coming back for any approvals at all. Whether they should or shouldn't be is a different conversation, but, you know, the question just arose about, you know, if this is reversed, what would it mean? And the conversation is important to have wherever we go.
It's my job to push back, so I'm going to push back a little bit.
No, I know it is.
But by that logic, you know, could not someone purchase this house as it exists currently and turn the living room into a bedroom?
Of course they could.
Yeah.
We know that. But that's why we ask these questions here.
Yeah.
Because it's a matter of honesty and integrity.
And I don't know if the living room would afford the same level of privacy that you would need for a bedroom, where you'd be passing through the living room to get to other rooms. And that makes it not usable.
Well, I mean, a
as
couple of
bedroom.
things that are triggering me is the full bathroom and the fact that you do have a potentially a private entrance.
Yes.
You can get into this space and it could become very private by just installing a door. Whether that's, I mean, I don't think it's desirable, I don't think it is something that makes it very attractive, but is it possible? That's just the purpose of the conversation.
And yet it makes sense to have a door there for a boot room because,
Yeah.
you know, walk in and get rid of your dirty clothing.
I mean, the reason it's interesting, the reason she does not want to put a door separating that boot room from the rest of the house is again because her cat's litter box is there. So
It's just sitting on
it
the
needs to be
floor?
accessible. No, it's under a counter. Actually, can you put down 2 more slides? Thank you. So, the intent with this litter box is that this is a sort of 36-inch tall folding counter next to the stacked washer and dryer, which would be a surround, and the thought is that her cat's litter box would be under this counter.
Right, so we have another obstruction there that really prevents the positioning of the bed in any reasonable way.
I'm not positive, and I can look at this in the computer, but I don't think a queen, so this is a queen size, it's my king, and I don't even think you could use a queen size bed
Well, you
over
could
here.
use it, you could use a small size sofa or
Sure.
I think this is, to me, it's announcing itself as a laundry room.
Right.
And that's kind of a necessary function. You gotta have it somewhere. And putting it there kind of keeps you from using that as a bedroom, because who wants to sleep in the laundry room? People coming, doing their, drying their socks.
That's kind of what
So the reason it comes up is because it's in the code. As you know, a couple of years ago, the code changed, and I just pulled up the definition, which says that, bedroom is a portion of a residential dwelling unit designed to be suitable for sleeping purposes, which may contain closets, may have access to a bed, bathroom, and meets uniform building code requirements for room size, light, and ventilation. And this is the part that matters. At the discretion of the planning board, where the board has determined that a den, library, study, loft, or room designed on building plans submittals has been determined to be habitable, it shall be considered a bedroom for the purposes of this chapter. So it's really, it's at your discretion. So whatever the board feels, it is. We just have to make a determination. You have to make a determination on what you feel it is for the purposes of moving forward.
I think it's not a good point, so.
Yeah, I agree. It's,
Sharon? I think we're all agree.
All right.
Thank you.
But thank you for showing the diagrams, because that helps.
Yeah, totally. It's a reasonable concern. Crazy.
Well, especially given that I saw a circle there, that tells me that it's probably a cistern or a cesspool.
Oh, so it's actually an old decommissioned well. It's already been filled in, and we would be basically doing a slab on top of it.
Okay, I thought that was the septic.
So it's
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So there is a decommissioned well, which is I don't know if it's actually marked in here. That's currently here.
Okay.
So we'll be pouring a slab on top of that if we're approved. And then it's not a cistern. It's just a distribution box, and it's approximately in this location.
Okay, where's the leach field?
We believe we haven't mapped it, but we think it's not over here.
Okay.
Anything else? Jen, I think you have a draft procedural resolution.
Okay, a draft procedure resolution for the board's consideration tonight for the application by Elizabeth Grammaticus for site plan and wetland permit under Town Code Chapter 125 and 120 for additions and landscaping grounds changes to an existing home and property at 41 Brook Road within the R810 zoning district. Accepting the application, supporting documents is adequate for further review. Classifying the action as type 2 under secret, for which coordinated environmental quality review is not required. We will schedule a public hearing for June 1st. Or no earlier than 6:05 p.m. We'll send it to the CAB, the WHC, and HAPAC for review, and we need 2 planning board members to do a site.
Would like to go?
I'll do it.
Wow. And you're Dan, your motion. Also vote. Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. I'll be in touch with you, schedule this.
Thanks very much, Anthony.
The second new application for this evening is that of Beverly King, 38 Mill Road, site plan review to renovate a porch. Could you? Yeah, I'll step way out there.
Take it out. Take it out.
There you go. I don't have to hold it.
Bad roadie. There we go.
Bed speaker. Okay, so my name is Beverly Kane, and I'm doing a very simple project. My front porch is currently step off of my house and need to be, I'd like to be able to access the porch in my wheelchair. So the proposal is to raise the porch level to the level of the house and then to expand the porch out 6 feet so that I can actually roll around the wheelchair once I get on the porch. And the facade of it, we're not changing the width, only the depth, and so it's the same as it does now. The roof isn't changing or anything.
So I took a look at this, if the board remembers, it was last meeting, May 4th meeting. We took a look at this as a ZBA referral, and the board did not find that there were any planning or environmental issues or visual issues with the proposed porch extension. And so that was the referral we sent back to the ZBA. I really have no comments on this, we're seeing it because it's on a scenic road. The only notice that the planning board can't act until the ZBA has made a determination with one possible exception. So, I was taking a look at this because we've already reviewed it and the planning board didn't have any issues. We did discuss it in May and it is before the ZBA. I was thinking if it was, the board's agreeable that you could consider waiving the public hearing for this. Do an approval tonight and then rely on the ZBA to hold a public hearing. If the ZBA goes through with it, then that would be the final application. We don't have to do a public hearing here. That is allowable for the planning board to handle the public hearing.
So, may I hear a motion with Sharon? I think you're in agreement.
Yes.
So I understand the motion with the public hearing.
So, second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, Jen, I think you're going to draft approval resolution.
I looked it up right before the meeting, so let's screw something up. Approve the resolution for the application by Beverly Kane for site plan, or should just say site plan. Site plan under Town Code Chapter 125. I'll fix this later. For porch extension of 41 Hook Road within the area zoning district, we'll check that.
I'm not at Oak Road.
I'm sorry. I'll type it up.
Good catch.
Road 30.
We just moved you to the other side of town.
Hey, look at that. That was great.
Alright, and I will take care of this later, I think, real quick. Anyway,
It's
so,
R10.
reaffirming the proposed action is type 2, actually, we were just affirming the proposed action is type 2 under seeker, for which planning environmental quality review is not required. We're waiving the requirement for public hearing for the town code, based upon the submitted information, finding the work is consistent with the objectives and regulations of chapter 125. With respect to the site plan approval, finding the working intent of use is consistent with town code chapter 125, and approving the application inclusive of the materials by Christina Duchamp Architecture dated December 2nd, 2025. Conditioning this upon receipt of approvals from the town of Rhinebeck zoning board of appeals. Asking board to authorize the planning board chair to stamp and send both site plan upon the applicant's satisfaction of the three conditions listed there. Reminding everyone that taking this action, you are authorizing the board secretary to provide the approval resolution to the applicant along with details on the next steps required to finalize the planning board process. And then all plan sketches and the materials submitted to the building department must be the same as those submitted to the planning board.
Is there a motion? Second. Second. I'll call the board. Craig?
Aye.
Edna? Aye. Sharon? Aye. And I vote aye.
Thank you.
Well, so we're just relying on, you will continue your appearance before the zoning board of appeals?
Yes, which is Wednesday this week. So
Yeah.
Public hearing at the ZBA on Wednesday. I'll keep the board informed of the decision of the ZBA.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That concludes the new applications for this evening. We will start, let's see, the first public hearing that was scheduled was 968 Route 308 LLC. The applicant has requested a continuation to June 15th. May I have a motion to that effect? Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? None. 34 Mill Road LLC, site plan review, renovation and addition. We have received a request from the applicant to indefinitely postpone this, continue this indefinitely at this point, right? Pardon?
Undetermined date.
Undetermined date and time. And they are aware of the fact that they'll have to renotice when they come back and look to get back on the agenda. May I hear a motion to continue this to undetermined date and time? Motion and second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion carries. The next application this evening is that of Andrew Samuels and Karen Gottlieb, Graham, 531 South Mill Road, site plan review and special use permit, single-family dwelling unit. No one here?
Oh, it's already on that.
Hurry on up.
Quick, sorry.
Thought you were getting away.
So I'm Matt Town from Willingham Town Engineering for Andrew Samuel's project. And since the last meeting, we had another site visit. We got the path cleared of vegetation, so we were able to walk where the actual driveway is going to go. We also submitted to DPW for the driveway permit and addressed most of Christian's comments, most of the engineering comments. There's a couple remaining calculations for culverts. That's really the big one that I'm seeing. I'm wondering if I can deal directly with him to satisfy those couple remaining. Okay, sure.
Just, certainly have conversations with him and then he can report back to us. He'll tell us what the results of that are.
Yeah. One of the biggest.
With the DPW and the highway, are we still waiting there?
Yeah, I've submitted to them, but I'm still waiting. At the site visit, he didn't see any issues. The driveway's already been there. It's a decent site distance. The biggest change from the last plan we submitted was we're meeting the code for the driveway pavement section. Every part over 6% is now proposed to be paved. So that'll help with stability, prevent erosion, help with plowing, all that stuff. So I think that was a good start.
Good. Jim, I look at your notes, it looks like report on a recent site visit.
And referring back to Christian, I did take a look at his most recent memo, just now, and it's really just technical issues. I don't think there's anything substantial there. Yeah. So I think, Christian's comments, engineering comments are pretty minor. They're just technical elements. The big one's just that we need county highway approval, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. We've seen this one a couple times in the past, and we've gone through this.
Sharon, I know you did the site visit.
Yep. Can you pull up the pictures, Jim? I think I did a third site visit, we just put it highly unusual. But the first two visits, the road bed was totally 100% brush. They had flags like every 50 feet, and you couldn't even see them from the walking path. So they did clear a path for us. If I can remember where they are. I think this is the turn off. Looks like the turn off. From the walking path, it's about halfway down to the driveway.
But it's actually the driveway, I think, where it takes a turn and then
I think that's that picture. It's fairly steep, so it's going to require a lot of fill. And a lot of fill and culverts.
More grading, not a ton of fill. It's gonna be graded.
You can see this last picture you just put up is, you can see how steep it is in one section. Oh. Use it. Here, use it. Oh. Yeah, you can see this was really steep, but this showed up steep. These others were fairly, a little bit steep, but not as severe as this one. This was about halfway down, maybe a third of the way down, third of the way down. During the next.
And that's the section where it approaches 14% slope, the rest of it's about 10%, or less.
The big, the standing up there at the top on this one, and then this was the steepness. As it goes down further, it does level out a little bit. You have those pictures, Jim?
You only have 3 from me earlier?
No, I sent a whole bunch. A whole bunch at once. Okay, well, as you go down the path and turn towards the door, it does level out a bit. And it is out of the 100-foot buffer of the wetland. My biggest concern is the turnaround area for fire trucks and ambulances. Really seems kind of small. Be okay for a pickup truck. I don't know about a fire engine, but we'll have to go back to the fire department.
It's too small, it's like quite a few.
Those pictures.
These are the ones you sent me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they cleared the road bed. It was what? It was pretty wide. It was easy walking. I think the bottom picture, can you make that bigger? I think that's,
My computer's just running.
I think that's the one that shows the culvert down by the accessory building to the west, which may have been put in, was probably put in there by the previous owners when they owned from Southfield Road all the way down to the creek. It's hard to see there. But yeah, I think that was the steepness at the beginning of the road bed from the walking trail and the parking area.
I had quite a few comments, so I wrote them down, and I'd like to go through them. Sharon and I took the driveway route to the accessory dwelling site, and then I took the trail back, the much steeper trail back to my car. And it's obvious that the steep trail cannot be used for the driveway. It might work for an ATV, but that's about it. If there's going to be a dwelling near the falls, the driveway will be needed for construction trucks and future car and emergency traffic. We did notice that some stakes were not at the center line of the drive, as CPL had pointed out, and Matt has plans to correct that. It was obvious to me that substantial cutting and filling is going to be required to level the drive, as well as tree cutting, which, according to Matt, all the trees to be cut are noted on the site plan. And we said that no fill is going to be imported except for driveway construction materials, correct?
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that a lot of material is going to be needed to stabilize the road on the downhill side. There is a long stretch where the driveway slopes down and curves at the same time, making it vulnerable to cars falling off the edge. And as shown on the site plan, there will be a long, curving, heavy-duty wood guardrail at that stretch. I think you agreed with CPL that most of the driveway is going to need to be paved because of slope?
Yeah,
And
that's-
most or all of the driveway is going to be paved. And then as you approach the accessory dwelling site, the land slopes down to the site, and there's almost half of a bowl around the site, so that the pump-up septic is on part of that slope. And there's not a lot of level area before the actual building site. As Sharon said, the fire department cited a need for a turnaround area near the site, and a small area had been cleared to show where that will be. But I think we both noted that there certainly could be times when more than one emergency vehicle is going to be needed there. And this could really create a problem if the time is urgent, particularly if there's another car there, an owner car for a visitor car. So I believe a larger turnaround area is needed, and that might require cutting into the hill a bit. Finally, I left feeling sad about the changes to the property that will be needed to accommodate the owner's plans, and I sense the owner might regret this too. Once you enter the woods, you pass the primary house site and you go up a bit of a hill, then the land feels like a hilly, forested wilderness, especially as you approach the falls and you start to hear the sound of the falling water. So to my mind, a long 12-foot wide, impervious paved driveway with obvious deep cuts through the hillside and a heavy-duty guardrail, plus the larger turnaround area that I think is needed, all of that tends to destroy the desired effect of an unexpected, lovely structure that sits lightly on the land in this magical, undisturbed setting. I think it's not going to feel that way anymore with that driveway approaching it. And as Sharon pointed out, none of that would be necessary if the accessory dwelling was sited closer to the house and the structure near the falls was a gazebo.
Well, I didn't make the site visit, so I apologize for not having seen that, but I'm absorbing everything that everyone's saying. And I suppose there's going to be some carving into an embankment, maybe some sort of a retainage to keep the grade from tumbling down across the driveway.
Yeah, I mean, it would be graded so that it had a steepness that it could be vegetated. So yeah, it would be cut on one side, filled on the other. So it's essentially a balance.
Yeah. Is it a requirement to have a driveway to this structure?
Is it a requirement?
Yeah.
Yes.
By law?
By the fire code, because I thought that it was, there was like a 300-foot threshold. I'm not that up on the...
Well, I'm sorry, one of the things that's disappointed me is that we've worked very hard to get engagement with both the fire inspector and the fire department, and neither has responded in terms of what their needs would be. And I think, the reason we keep asking is because we want to care about the people who will be at the end of that driveway and want to ensure that should there tragically be a fire or a medical emergency, that those vehicles can get down there and address it as quickly as possible. So I'm disappointed that we haven't been able to have that conversation.
And you can't have a place where people live and sleep without access for
I think that has been one of the overriding questions throughout this discussion of surrounding the driveway, and I agree with you. I didn't make the site visit when I was there before, and the area that will be in front of, not on the falls side, but on the in front of side of this building is compact and tight, and I tried to imagine a fire truck getting down there, perhaps followed by an ambulance or a second vehicle, or mutual aid, should that have to be involved, or even, I mean, I don't want to make up scenarios, but we all have been there, we know that this house is perched beautifully over a big drop down to the waterfall. God forbid somebody falls over. You're going to have to get equipment in there to get somebody out. So that's what's behind this conversation, and I do agree that I don't believe that the space there for fire department vehicles, emergency vehicles, is compatible to what is sufficient to address that possibility.
I mean, I think the architecture is beautiful. I would love to see something that beautiful there, but somehow, once you're down that blacktop driveway that's 12 feet wide with a big guardrail, and then what you have to do in front of the accessory dwelling to really make it safe, it kind of destroys the effect.
All right. We're still waiting for more information, correct?
Yeah, the DPW and I need to work with Christian. I will say, I have increased the size of the turnaround area since our previous discussion. And that was per the fire chief's comments. I talked to him when we were down there, and we talked about an area where it could be extended. So that has been done.
Oh, we saw that when
Yeah.
we were there.
Yep.
That was a small area.
I can provide truck turning templates that can show that a emergency vehicle can maneuver.
Two at a time, please. Two emergency vehicles. Let's say an ambulance and a fire truck.
That's a little unorthodox.
No.
Two emergency vehicles.
This, at the end of the drive, is that what you would, right here,
Yeah.
is that what you would call a hammerhead?
Yeah, it's 20 feet wide, and it extends about 60 feet.
60-foot hammerhead, I think, is what the code requires.
Well, for a fire apparatus road, which this is not,
Okay.
it's actually a 70-foot. I can take a look at it, and I can show turning templates on it to verify that emergency vehicles can.
Good.
Yeah.
What is intended for the area around the drive and the turning area down there? What's the
Just
intention?
vegetation, just keep it as natural as possible.
Because I'm wondering, there are paving stones that allow grasses between them. I'm wondering if you could extend that using something like that.
That's a good idea.
That tends to look like grass, but it allows a vehicle to be on it.
We're still waiting on the ZBA. They're on the ZBA's agenda for Wednesday, I believe.
Yes, we need public hearing.
Is there anything from the public wishing to comment on this application? All right, then, I think a motion to continue is in order. When would you like to continue to? Would normally be on June 1st? 15th. June 15th.
Is it this evening? Is it this evening, May Wednesday?
No,
Is it the second or third?
it's been continued for a few meetings because there's been the site visits, and then the planning board had requested continuation as it continues its review. So right now, it's on a continued public hearing. And I assume the planning board is still reviewing, you'd like the ZBA to continue public hearing until you're further along in your review process?
I think so.
Continue the public hearing. What is he doing?
All right.
What are we agreeing to?
We're agreeing to
Continue
continue
to-
the public hearing.
I think it's, you said to June
It'll be June
15th.
1st.
What, I'm confused. This is just, we said Grammaticus for June 1st. In our resolution.
Yeah.
Why did we do June 1st?
Because that was a mistake.
Okay.
I didn't rectify it.
That's what I was,
Would it be possible to close the public hearing? No one's spoken at the ZBA or the planning board.
I don't think it's necessary at this point. We'll just continue it. So we'll go back and correct that June 1st. So June 15th is the motion to continue to June 15th. Motion?
Motion.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
The next public hearing for this evening is Local Land Partners Develop 5.3 308 Mason Subdivision and Lot Subdivision.
So, since the last meeting, we did get copies of several different comments. The one, our copy for the Council Advisory Board's comments that were, they read into the record at the last meeting. And then we got a copy of your comments as well, and yours as well. So, what I figured I would do is kind of walk through those a little bit. I did bring copies of the letter that we got put together for, officially for the Council Advisory Board, or Conservation Advisory Board. And we can kind of just walk through, where we are as compared to last time. So, so I want to start with the Conservation Advisory Board's comment letter. The main reason being that there are a handful of things in that letter that we need to kind of correct for the record. Some of their information is based on the DEC's jurisdictional parcel determination letter, which we're in the process of coordinating with DEC on, because there's some information in there that doesn't seem to be applicable to our site, and I'll walk through that a little bit. So starting with that, the comment from the Conservation Advisory Board is literally just the answer of yes to federal and DEC wetlands. So federal, no issue with it. Obviously, these will be Army Corps jurisdictional wetlands on site. We're avoiding them anyway, so it's more or less a non-issue. But with respect to the DEC ones, that's coming from that DEC's jurisdictional letter that was received for the project back, I believe, in August of last year. The link that the Conservation Advisory Board listed in their answer of yes brings you correctly to the DEC's environmental resource mapper. You pull up the site itself, and you can dive into the details related to wetlands on there. That jurisdictional letter from DEC mentions a few things. One, it says that there are DEC wetlands over 12.4 acres in size on site. The biggest wetland we have on our site is under 5 3/4 acres. So we have reached out to DEC on this in particular. Obviously, with everything going on right now with the DEC's process, we have to wait for that process to basically get vetted before we can officially and formally receive anything of an update to this letter. But I just want to let the board know that we are in the process of getting that information once they're able to provide it. But they did reply back to our email, and some of this information I'll show you in just a second here was included in the email that we sent to help help them see what we're, why we're asking the questions that we're asking. But in their email response, they basically said, it looks like we'll need to reevaluate the site once the standard operating procedure for determining jurisdiction is released to the public on the website. So they're more or less acknowledging that, yeah, something doesn't quite seem right as well, but they can't really give us an answer until they're able to. Just a couple quick high points on what I'm talking about. I don't know how well you can see this from where you're at, but just quickly, this is over the top of the aerial. The red is the rough outline of the parcel, which I just did.
Yeah.
And then below it is where all the information from the firm mapping shows that there are, across Route 308 and several hundred feet further, away from the site. There are floodplains, there are, the streams stuff down there, but none of that is on our site. We acknowledge it's wetlands, we know that, we delineate the wetlands and we're working around them. But that's part of what we're questioning, because the DEC letter does say that we're in a floodplain and we're not. So we're trying to get confirmation on that from them. Additionally, it says that there are previously mapped wetlands. So anybody that's used that BRM website, there's categories of wetlands. You can click the boxes, it'll show you what you want to see from basic categories, one of them being previously mapped wetlands. This is just a screenshot that I took and put the parcel boundary over the top of it. So the only thing that's even in proximity to our site is, again, across the road, across 308 from it, for those previously mapped wetlands. So just another thing we're trying to get clarification from the DEC on. Obviously, as soon as we have that, we'll provide that to the board. So that was the first part of the...
Can I just interject?
Absolutely.
That is the DEC wetland totality, just across the street, but there are Army Corps of Engineers federal mapped wetlands on the property.
So just the way the Army Corps, federal wetlands are Army Corps wetlands, so anytime you have wetlands, basically that's kind of the category.
Right, well, the town of Rhinebeck recognizes both, not just the DEC.
Right, all I'm talking about though is just clarifying that we're trying to get information from DEC to have them update their letter that says they're sure they have jurisdiction wetlands on the site itself. So
Okay.
yes, I understand what you're saying, Bruce. No problem. And then I'm just going to kind of hit the high points. I won't go through every single thing on here. And then we'll send this to Gretchen as well, so get some of them to your own copy. So just on one of the other comments, talking about floodplains, I think that's all the same line that it's not. It's all on the opposite side of the road.
And I think you had said that at the site visit, that we weren't in
Right.
floodplains, but that DEC said otherwise.
Right, and so that's we're
Get
just
that
trying to...
straight.
As soon as they're able to give us the answers, I'm sure that they'll make the amendment to that. The next one is a little bit of an answer/question. So one comment that they had said that the parcel is located along a historic scenic road, Route 308. We were unable to find anything in the code that indicates, other than a section of 308 that's down here, going from basically the river at Charles Street up here to Route 9 is considered scenic, but once you get out in front of our parcel, there's nothing that we can find that indicates that. So we're just putting that into our response, and also just respectfully requesting that if there is something that we just haven't seen, if that's going to be provided to put into our information. And then really the biggest one is with respect to the comment that talked about that the plan identifies 35 acres of conservation land. A review of the last statistics shows that the majority of land consists of wetlands and regulatory buffers that cannot be built upon regardless of whether a conservation subdivision design is used. So we're replying to that in a couple different ways. So the first and main one is that 35 acres is not the accurate number, it's actually over 65 acres. So you've kind of got a flip-flop of what's being conserved and what's being utilized for development. But then the other part is, and I think it might even come up in a couple of comments at last month's meeting, that we're basically, with the implication that we're more or less kind of taking advantage of the code and locating the open space lands in places that we couldn't build anyway. But what I want to make sure I point out is it's exactly what the code tells you to do. You've got to identify primary and secondary conservation areas. those get into all of the details of what's included in that for slopes, buffers from them, the trails, the soils, all those kind of things. And then you're required to incorporate those into the open space preservation area. So we're literally doing exactly what the code tells you have to. We're not scripting the system or anything like that. We're working it in the way you're supposed to. There was another reference in here to clustering, and sound like a broken record here from the past meetings too, but just want to reiterate that we're doing a conservation subdivision, not a cluster subdivision. And then the last one talks about the establishment of the land trust to manage the open space area. So we can get into more of this in a little bit, but basically, the developers reached out to local land trusts. As of yet, they haven't found anybody interested in taking it on. I think we kind of all do that way back in October at our preliminary meeting that we were talking about. That's probably unlikely, but we are trying. We are making that outreach.
Part of the reluctance of land trusts is the infinite ongoing cost of monitoring easements. And I'm wondering if you have offered to help pay those costs by means of a contribution.
That's been a conversation at this point.
No, I think I can solution.
Okay. So we can come back to more detail later on that consent if that's okay with you. So the current anticipation is that the project's going to be managed through an HOA, and they'll be tasked with managing the open space. And this is all, like I said, it's in there, but basically Article 8, Conservation Subdivision 118.2, standards and procedures, and HOA is an acceptable form of ownership of open space preservation areas. Specifically, code states open space land may be owned in common by a homeowners association dedicated to the town or held in non-common private ownership. So at this time, the 66.5 acres of preserved land is anticipated to be covered by a permanent conservation easement or as a separate parcel to be owned in common by all HOA members in an undivided share format. Because none of the land trusts up to this point anyway have been expressed interest in holding a conservation easement and managing the preserved land, we will end up at a point where we've got to request the board to consider and grant a waiver related to one other section that talks about the land trust having to be the one that does, because there's two back-to-back sections of the code that talk about the HOA and the land trust, and so we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But that's kind of the update on that piece. And you want to jump in now on that part then, or?
Well, yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, I did have some informal discussions with the Winnicke Land Trust, and my impression was that they were not interested. Project wasn't a good fit for them. So the suggestion was to submit a formal inquiry, and they would give us something in correct. So that's what we're waiting for at this point.
Chris, is Winnicke the only land trust that you guys have talked to so far?
Sorry?
Is Winnicke the only?
The only one, but we're gonna send the same inquiry letter to we're thinking about Scenic Hudson and then Dutchess Landing Services.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hopefully this will hold this one up for you to see. So this one is more or less a status of where we're at with reacting to the comments that you had in your site visit observation and the suggestions that we put together in your comment letter. Doesn't have lot lines on it yet. It's an in process, but I just wanted to bring it tonight so you guys can see that we're working towards finding some mutually agreeable configurations here. So on this, what you're seeing is that we've taken those back to lots, the back two houses that require the additional stream crossings to get to. And we've pulled those inward. taken one and kind of tucked it up here in the corner, and actually you probably remember pretty well at that one area where we were near that one particular stone wall. So it's been pretty close to that location. The other one we put onto the other side in this area here. So I think doing that will kind of do like what you guys were aiming at in your conversation with that. It'll let us pull all this kind of inward a little bit. I don't have it on there because it was probably getting a little bit too muddy, but it'll let us kind of wrap that open space preservation area and more or less like an upside down view kind of around all of this, and it'll eliminate, I mean, it was continuous, but it was bisected by a couple driveways, so it eliminates that piece of it as well.
And is the idea that the conserved area will be open to all of the homeowners?
I believe that's definitely the anticipation. It's not reflected on here yet, but what that'll also do for us is back into here where we were having to do a little bit of rerouting of some of the horse trails that are back there now, just so we didn't have them walking right up to people's back windows. So it'll let us leave more of what's out there kind of as it is. So that's kind of where we're at with that piece. I don't know if Christian said that he was going to be sending you guys an email just to give you a heads up that I did have about a little over an hour long virtual meeting this afternoon talking about the project.
Already.
So, okay.
Haven't gotten anything since this afternoon. Just got it.
Okay. So he mentioned that he was, just so that, you guys aren't thinking I'm making it up or something, but we did have a good conversation, talked through quite a bit with the project. In particular, stormwater management. We talked through a little bit of what we're anticipating doing as we dive into the next level of detail and get into that. And what I explained to him is kind of like the approach we're taking on the rest of the project in general. We're going to work this through so that we minimize our impacts on the site. And what I mean by that is we don't want to do something where we rip up a portion of the site to create a stormwater practice that's not going to function as well as what's already out there because of the size of the parcel, the natural, meadowlands and buffers for the wetlands themselves. So the intent and approach is going to be to capitalize on what the site is, do the practices that we need to do, but in a way that's not just digging a big hole in the ground and trying to concentrate all the stormwater flow into one location of the site. And that'd be virtually impossible on this site anyway to get it to a central location. So he seemed on board with that approach. Obviously, he needs to see the details when we get to that point to review it, but the approach seemed reasonable to him. I think the other piece is that we will be pulling together a package to submit to DOT for the driveway itself. One of the things I'm sure you guys are aware, but just to point it out, we will have to we have to meet DOT's configuration. So even though once we get into the site, we're going to be doing the common driveways and, they're maxed out at 16-foot width, which I actually think we're going to have to, when we have the conversation with the fire chief, they're push us to 20, but to see what they say. But at the road connection itself, we've got to meet DOT standards, so that's going to probably flare out to 24 feet most likely, and have required radiuses and all that, but then we can talk about that distance when we get proper distance away from the right of way.
Is there no way to get rid of that upper left driveway?
This one here?
Yeah, by combining it with the lower driveway?
So that is something that we're going to explore a little bit. We looked at it kind of early on, but you see the yellow and the tan colors here. That's those two categories of steep slopes for the different stuff in the yield plan and the subdivision plan itself. And so the reason we had steered away from it initially was because of that. I mean, you can traverse slopes, and we're doing it at other locations where you don't just bomb straight up the slope. You're never going to be able to make that via code compliant driveway anyway, but you can traverse them sideways and work with it. But that was what initially steered us away from it, but we are exploring whether that would make more sense or not. But we're doing this kind of approach. I believe that that's most of the updates we got at the moment. Did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so part of what I just wanted to, obviously from the last meetings and even the pre-conferences that we've had, this map really closely represents the very early, if you remember a couple of years ago when we first came in, kind of the early thinking around keeping the build envelopes and the driveways kind of close to one another. So I feel like we've addressed a bulk of the comments. One of the things that we like to do is advance the process. When we had talked through, I believe it was Melanie and Jim and maybe a few others on the pre-conference, this process of the conservation subdivision being a format in which we could follow let's say, a set of guidelines to have a kind of predictable cadence of meetings and updates and answers. And so I feel like we're at the place now where, candidly, I was hoping we were a little bit further along by this meeting. We just spoke to CPO today. We had reached out a couple times. And so what I'm hoping is that we can kind of set the stage for the next meeting, where we can kind of pick up the pace as much as possible, get the seeker, get any of the other elements of this advanced. Because, if another month goes by, when I think we talked about the original process, it was 3 to 4 meetings. We're already 6, 7 meetings deep now. So I'd like to just try to make sure we come back next time with the process advanced as far as it can go, and we've got as much time to prepare for that. Because Craig, this guy's great at what he does. He did this literally 20 minutes before he got here, so that we could at least show you that we've made some progress. But we reached out previously, and again, we're just trying to continue to evolve the project. But I think we're in a really good place, and we've got continuous flow, and we've adjusted a lot based on the feedback from the council.
Is there anything in your positioning of the house sites that requires any kind of exception from the planning board, which in a conservation subdivision we can give, but it would be nice for us to know what they are, where they are?
So the answer is yes, and it's based on your comments at the last meeting, which are reflected in the shifts that we're working towards right now. So the shifts we've made are only possible if you're able to actually grant waivers from things like some of those slope buffers and things like that you mentioned at the last meeting. So yes, is the answer to me to give relief from some of that.
And I think it's mostly on, like you said, the slope buffers. And to your credit, last time too, we also, we're not crossing the streams now, so tighten it up. Tighten it up quite a bit.
Jim?
I don't have any new comments. I think I was kind of in the same place that you are, and that I think we just need to get some kind of a list of where the board sees this needs to be in order to move forward. I think that map really represents kind of where we're headed. And then hearing from you, what are the waivers that you need to make sure that we can get those waivers done so that we can all end up in the same place, understanding exactly what you need to do to get what you want, make sure the enforcement system is happy with what's here, and then we can move forward with the rest of the process. We can go to DOT and start coming about some of the details. I don't really have any additional comments. I gave you a couple minor comments last time. But yeah, we'll have to determine what those waivers would be and just double check to make sure we can do those. There is some flexibility, but things like driveway lengths, sometimes we have to rely on the fire department and the fire inspector. So some of those we may not be able to. But that's where we'll start the discussion, and if one of them is a driveway length, then we'll have to get the fire inspector to make sure that they're okay with it as a fire code issue.
Well, yeah, so it may end up being width as well, but we actually mentioned probably 3 or 4 meetings ago when we were talking about those 2 back lots, that we put the end of the common driveway where the code said we had to go any further, but we said at the time we would love to be able to try and minimize those stream crossings. Even though we pull things in, we don't need those stream crossings anymore. The same philosophy is still going to apply because, and I understand the reality of the fire code part, so we have those conversations with the fire chief, but we want to make sure everything is aligned so that we're not kind of going counter to the goal of the code and why it's written the way it is, and the concept of the conservation subdivision, where we're just kind of forcing ourselves. If we could have gone 50 more feet with a common portion, it would save 8 more giant trees or something like that.
I mean, it's the board's, discussion and determination. From a planning perspective, what you've shown there, I think, provides a larger chunk of open space, which is something we've been hearing you want. It eliminates 2 of the crossings, which will make life easier for DEC, not having to do those crossings, and keeps you out of the wetland buffers. So those are all positive steps forward, certainly, I think, based on what we've been discussing in the last couple of meetings. So, I think just making sure we all kind of understand.
Well, and also the underlying logic of the conservation subdivision is not just, to save the trees, but also to enhance a sense of community, to preserve the rural lifestyle in Rhinebeck, and to have common resources that will minimize the impact of traditional construction. So anything that can be saved or that can be shared can be saved. So the common driveways kind of play into that. But any other resources like that that can be shared by neighboring properties are to the benefit of the project. Also, one of the things that's in the code is having access to alternative means of transportation. And I think the horse trails are a perfect example of that, because you don't get more alternative than that. And just the fact that that's being preserved and that's a part of the project, I think is very much to the benefit. And just being very clear about what it is that this conservation subdivision is conserving is an important thing to hold on to. And, those types of measures that are in this, I think, are valuable and beneficial.
Where did you end up on the lot size?
We haven't laid in the lot lines yet. We just got the push and pull on where the houses probably fit in there, and they'll be working at the driveways and working with the slopes. Now we kind of like the process that's spelled out in the code with 4 steps, we're at that, working with the lot lines. And we have to get into looking at the things like the soil improvement systems to ensure that we're not showing a lot that we can't put something on.
It's a lot of good work.
Thank you.
Anything else from planning board?
No, I just had one thing to ask the board about. So looking ahead to the part 2 of the environmental assessment form, I didn't know whether there's been discussion about a lot of things. There hasn't been a lot of discussion about animals and habitat. There'll be some questions that you're going to have to answer when you come up on question 7 in part 2 of the EAF. So you should take a look at those questions and see whether you have the information that you need. We're going to start talking about moving into that phase, and if there is additional information that you're going to want, it would be a good time to ask that now, so that you're not asking for that information when you're going through and completing the forms. It would save you.
We did submit part 1 of the EAF, and as you know, but when you do that now with the online version, it auto-populates quite a few of the answers for you, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I just want the board members to know whether they're going to be comfortable with being able to that they have the information they need to answer the questions, because otherwise they're going to be asking you for the information later on when they're going through that.
And when we did that too, just so that you know, we didn't get hits for things like bad or a lot of the typical suspects didn't show up on the answers.
Understood, but the question still asks, that item still asks questions about what's on the site. And most of the DEC analysis has to do with whether there's things like bats or threatened species or things like that. But there's a lot of animals that don't fall into those categories, and other issues that like fragmentation and things like that don't necessarily come through with those auto responses from DEC, which are not site specific. I would also mention.
Just as a quick point of reference, so Craig, I agree with you. I don't think there are any pipelines on this parcel. And so far as the DEC goes, as we know, things are kind of in flux, but we got some information that said that they're going back to the previously mapped wetlands. So these were the wetlands we looked at when we first talked about this, that we thought that you got to go get the GD. This is total progress. This is still like these are obviously on the property.
Right.
When you go back and look at the previously mapped ones, they disappear. They're not there. So things have changed, and what's going on is changing. So we're working with it as we go. But this is what apparently we need to work with now as of 2 weeks ago. So just putting it out there so everybody understands. The maps have changed a lot from what we were working with less than 3 weeks ago to right now. Just a lot less previously mapped wetlands.
The informational wetlands layer shows stuff on the site that does seem to correlate pretty well with what's actually been delineated on the site. So
and these are just general mapping, but things have changed. So we're working with it. I just want to point that out. That hasn't changed just last 2 weeks.
And on the streams too, I mean, we've kind of taken care of the issue by pulling things in so we don't have those stream crossings, other than the one existing one that's already there. But those sort of DEC wasn't trying to be up to you guys at the town with your wetland regulations to implement these.
Is there anyone here from the public wishing to comment on this application?
Amanda Miller for Jim Fairmaccio, the neighbor right below. Before I came here, Dan Kohler, an engineer, provided me with a sort of a picture where he thinks we can relocate the driveway. I was hoping to work with my friends over here, but they never showed me anything. So basically, Dan thinks that we can move the driveway 250 feet over this way, and it would go around a wetland and then back into here. That would, I think, alleviate Mr. Marinaccio's concerns and make it so his driveway isn't directly across from a significantly widened driveway with two-way traffic, because that is a road that cars travel fast on.
Why does it have to be relocated? Is there something?
He's concerned that when he comes out of his driveway, there's going to be issues, because he is, normally there's not 6 homes there, there's just one. And then he's also very concerned about the construction aspect of it. He's already having trucks parked on his property using his driveway for this project.
On the opposite side of the road?
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Any construction?
No, just.
Yeah.
I mean, just for the record, there's been no
Like,
construction.
I think like surveyors, like, I don't, like, no, I'm not implying there's construction. Whatever they're doing there just initially, so he's just concerned, and he wants to make it clear that it's like, separate, different.
So this is a request you're making of the applicant, which the applicant can review and respond.
And I know that John last time, or the time before that, asked me to submit my comments in writing. I wanted to give you a picture, John, to go along with those comments. So I can do that now that I have a picture with the.
Good. Is there something in the town code that I'm missing that says you can't have lined up driveways? I know sometimes the request comes in because people are worried that the headlights are going to be shining right into their living room, and it's an annoyance. But by offsetting the driveway, I don't know what that accomplishes.
It accomplishes what I said, which is when Jim's coming out of his driveway, he's not going to be facing a two-way driveway across from him, which has never been there before. Like I said, the time before last, I think, in order to accommodate the driveway for this subdivision, you have to widen it and make it into a commercial driveway.
I think there is an existing driveway, right?
There is, but it's a single,
The location, okay.
it's a single family driveway now. So we're just asking to move the apron forward 250 feet around the wetland. I obviously understand if it can't be done, but we want to try.
Well, when you submit,
Yeah.
what you be submitting, just make sure that there includes the narrative rationale for what he's requesting.
Yeah, no problem, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just ask the applicant, is there a number or some kind of contact information that Ms. Miller's client can reach out to if there is someone parking?
I know where to find it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, anything else? Oh. I don't have a problem with Jen starting to draft secret. Begin the steps toward that.
Sure.
Yeah?
Takes a while to
Everybody
draft
okay?
the determination.
What's the?
Have me start drafting
Directing Jen to start developing the secret.
I will make that motion.
Take a second and we'll vote on it, and I don't know that we have to.
All right.
That's okay. So Jim will undertake the beginnings of preparing the documents for us.
Part 2 of the environmental assessment.
Yeah. Anyone from the public? I think I asked if Amanda was interested. Anyone else? Entertain a motion to continue the public hearing? Motion and second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention,
What
motion
day is that
carries.
continued to, June 15th?
June 15th. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the progress you made. The next public hearing this evening is Rhinebeck Villas LLC, New York State Energy Middle Road.
evening. Sean Kemp on behalf of the applicant, Rhinebeck Villas. And I also have with me here tonight Skip Francis, the project engineer from Creighton Manning. As far as updates go, there isn't too much to report to the board. We had some correspondence requesting additional, if there was any additional information that the board's consultants needed. We didn't receive any additional requests, so we're hopeful that the record is complete enough for the board to be able to make the requisite hard look and finish its analysis under SECRA and issue a determination of significance.
I think generally speaking, I'm in the same place. We go through the part two. If the board is ready to do so, we have a number of items to complete. We have partial completions on items 1, 3, 4, 14, and 16, and we need to do item 10, which is historic resources, but I think we've discussed that quite a bit, so I think that one should be too difficult to go through. So I would just have to pull up the form.
I'm in for request. That's when we do that. I would really like to spend a few minutes clarifying two issues. One is the issue of potential contamination of soil, and the other is the issue of adequate water testing. And to do the first, if we could get the Dutchess County parcel access map up, of the general area. Okay, so looking at all of the stuff that, we've been given to review, and in particular this last set of information, John, I think you may have put this together, including letters to and from Creighton and so forth. I just wanted to understand here. This issue about lots 3 and lot 2, as I understand it, what we've got here is this is lot 3 that was subdivided into ABC. And this is lot 2. A question that I have is the property here, was that also owned by the Pitcher family? Was it? These lots were definitely owned by the Pitcher family. Was this lot also owned by the Pitcher family?
Yes. It's my understanding that the Pitcher family did. So there were a couple of different, I don't have the chain of title with me, but I know that and so I don't want to misspeak, but there were Pitchers involved with the parcels that are at issue, including the Rhinebeck Villas parcel. My hesitancy is because I think that there might have been a trust involved at some point in time. There might have been a Pitcher family trust or something of that nature. So I don't know exactly how the properties were held, but Pitcher was, my understanding, at one point in time, the owner of all the parcels that were at issue in the correspondence that was previously addressed. But the parcel that Rhinebeck Villas currently owns was not a parcel that was flagged in any of the correspondence regarding the dumping, except for the one letter where it references the parcel ID, but there's no reference to the planning board notes or anything that I could find in the record referencing this parcel specifically.
Right.
And it wasn't part of the subdivision that was at issue either.
Right. And when this subdivision took place of lot 3, lot 2 was not involved. It wasn't connected, I guess, to this other area here. It was a separate lot. So I'm referencing a letter.
Just, may I ask a
Yeah.
question? real quick? Are you sure that the 3 lots that you're referencing are the ones that were at issue, or the ones that are over to the left?
No, it's these.
Okay.
That's lot 3, A, B, and C now. And this is lot 2. So there is a letter to the Pitcher properties from a Mr. Mehta at the DEC Division of Solid and Hazardous Materials. And the reason I know that is it's referenced by Drayton Grant in her October 18th, 2004 return letter to Mr. Mehta. And there is a suggestion coming out of this that Lot 2 testing not be required for the purpose of the planning board's application for subdivision of Lot 3. And there is a, excuse me, I'm trying to look through my notes here. Yeah, there are a couple of statements by Drayton in these letters. There's a letter to the planning board, October 4th, 2004, and the letter to Mr. Mehta, October 18th, 2004, stating things like, the Pitchers have committed to mediate any problems on Lot 2, and the Pitchers have arranged for further investigation of Lot 2 to the extent of any contamination that can be determined and a cleanup plan developed. So do we know if it was ever done on Lot 2?
I was not able to find a record at DEC that anything ever happened.
Or in
That
your own
DEC
files?
That DEC managed. We don't have files from it. We only keep files 7 years. So
Well, where did these letters come from?
they were submitted by members of the public.
Ah, okay. Well,
And my office.
where I'm
Yes,
coming out
possibly.
here
I don't
is
recall what the
there are clearly requests from Drayton Grant that Lot 2 not be investigated immediately because they wanted to proceed with this subdivision. And there is no mention at all, apparently in the letter from Mr. Mehta, and certainly not the letter back to Mr. Mehta from Drayton Grant, of this parcel. In other words, if Mr. Mehta had seen contamination or knew about contamination on this parcel and was requiring, investigation of the soil, then Drayton Grant would have also said to him, we don't think that it's necessary to immediately do the core testing on this parcel because we're just trying to subdivide this area here. And all of this in my mind supports the claim that there has been no record of any kind of landfill on this property, and apparently no mention by the DEC of any problem with this property, as there was for Lot 2. And therefore, where I'm coming out on this is core testing of that property is not required. Then I would like to move on to water testing. And here, we know that the village did a high volume pump test to show that the well has the capacity to meet the hotel's needs and that the water contains no contaminants. And this led to Board of Health approval, right, of the well.
That's correct.
And this Board of Health approval did not signify that the Board of Health had ascertained that neighboring wells would not be negatively affected. Ensuring that those wells would be protected was in our jurisdiction, the planning board. When WSP, the testing contractor, reported to the villas that only 2 area homeowners had agreed to testing, did the villas alert the planning board of this before proceeding?
It's my understanding that this testing was performed before we went to pre-conference on the second round. The board wanted us to show that we had a well that could sufficiently support the project, and that's why we undertook that study. So at that point in time, the fact that neighboring landowners didn't want to participate in the study was not something that would be reported to the board.
Well, you were dealing with part of the board in pre-conference hearings, right?
Yeah, but...
Before you did the well testing.
Yeah, and the 72-hour test has been before the board for probably over a year now. And that had all the results of the public outreach contained in it.
I know, that's not really what I'm referencing.
Well, you asked so the answer is no, the applicant did not advise the board of that specifically, but the board did have information in its possession that would have revealed that.
When the testing contractor let villas know that only 2 homeowners had agreed, did the villas make any effort to contact the neighbors again before proceeding with testing, like calls to make sure that they had received the letter, writing or calling to see if they needed more information, inviting them to a meeting to answer their questions, offering an incentive to encourage them to cooperate?
So if you see in the 72-hour report and the materials that have been submitted from WSP, I think there was 2 letters that were sent out to adjacent landowners, and then there were site visits to their homes, where representatives of WSP went and knocked on people's doors and asked them to participate in the program. And there's actually a log, a little Excel spreadsheet that I've also supplied to the board that has the notes from the person that knocked on the door and said whether or not the people were willing to participate in the 72-hour test, and also contains some additional information regarding the stated reasons as to why they chose not to participate in the project or the 72-hour test. So I think that WSP took it upon itself to try and get as many people as possible to participate in the study. Some people chose not to. They have their, no one's obligated or compelled to do that. That's not something that's required by law to make somebody do. Similar to like a pre-blast inspection by a firm that comes in that's going to be doing blasting. They want to look at foundations and things of that nature. No one has to let them into the house, but if you choose not to participate in something like that, then you're left with the results of that.
So was it WSP that was doing all of this? They sent 2 letters?
Yes. And the letters, the contents of the letters have been supplied to the board. They're in the packet.
I'm just trying to review all of it.
No, I know. So 2 letters, I believe it was 2 letters, obviously at least 1, but I'm almost certain that there were 2. And then we had the follow-up site visits, and all of that information has been
And the follow-up site visits went to all of the property owners who were addressed initially by letter, is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, that seems to me to be about as much as a developer can do.
Can I just add my own take on this? Normally, from some of the reading that I've done, the 72-hour test is usually conducted in pursuit of a withdrawal permit, and that withdrawal permit is only required for withdrawals that exceed a certain threshold. I think it's 100,000 gallons per day, maybe about 4 times what the maximum would be expected for this site. Is that where the idea, like who said, well, we should go do this test? What test should we do? Let's do the 72-hour test. And, there's probably some sort of ASTM standard for conducting that test and stipulations that go with it, like the number of monitoring wells that are usually associated with, which I think is 3. Since the withdrawal permit isn't required, how valid is the test with only 2 monitoring wells?
I'm not a member of WSP, but I am a civil engineer. I do believe the 72-hour test is stipulated by the county health department. For even if it was a single lot residential well,
okay,
you want to pull a 72-hour demand test on your water well. So it's pretty standard to do a 72-hour test.
For single-family
one
household?
single-family house, yes.
Okay. And that's, where can I find the rules for that? Is that on Dutchess County Behavioral Health
It could be.
website? Okay.
Could be.
Jim, should there be any discussion about Part 5 standards that this is a public water supply? And that's part of the reason the Department of Health is involved. But there are additional safeguards and standards that can apply to Part 5 public water supplies, which I presume the DOH has said that have been met. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you're aware of that.
I don't know about the detail, but I know DOH has signed off on it. I just pulled up.
For the public, maybe somebody wants to explain what Part 5 is?
Well, you should be able to explain that, right?
Could I ask that people use their mics, please?
Mine's not working, so generally speaking, Part 5, when you're going to be supplying water to more than a certain number of people, you have to comply. You become classified as a public water supplier under the New York State Sanitary Code, which is administered locally by the Dutchess County Department of Health. And there are standards that, in order to get Department of Health approval for a public water supply, there are standards that have to be met with regard to water quality and water distribution that are separate. In other words, if you're drilling a well for a single residential home, you're not required to comply with those standards. But when there is a public water supply, then additional standards have to be shown with regard to water quantity and water quality. That's the extent of my knowledge, but I thought that you might want to talk about it because it is something that raises this up and makes it different than just adding 5 wells in a subdivision, for instance.
Agreed. You gave a very good summary of that, and from a high-level perspective, Part 5 is spelled with a V, like Roman numeral V. So if you're welcome to look that up, it does publish the various contaminants and percentages of parts per million for each of those. It establishes legal thresholds for safe drinking water standards. And we've done an initial lab analyticals. Those are the results in the WSP report. Nothing alarming is showing up. Ultimately, when this drinking water system gets designed, and it has the filtration and the treatment system to be designed, it will ensure that's what the DOH signs off on, that they can prove that it has been tested with the system operational, and that those thresholds are still under the legal standards.
Okay, so am I correct that if there had been contaminants found during the testing that exceeded those thresholds, the Department of Health would not have issued an approval?
Correct. There's been nothing alarming showing up at this time. Correct. And for the clarification, I think for everyone's sake, the Department of Health letter approves the location to construct the test well. And while the test well was drawn on the 72-hour test, the results have proven it has the demand, and the test laboratory analyticals have proved that there's nothing alarming. So that well will remain the well that will become the primary well. And ultimately, the DOH will give approval for the drinking water coming out of that well once the system is been designed and operational and tested before anyone drinks it.
Anything else? Jim, any more members you wish to go ahead and look at the questions that we've not addressed at this time?
Fair enough. No more questions.
Is everybody in agreement? Any reservations now? Okay.
No.
I'm not hearing any.
All right. Okay, so for the part 2 questions we have remaining, on item number 1, impact on land, we still have sub-items C and D left to discuss. Christian did provide me with some comments he couldn't be here tonight, but these are kind of the ones that he had led us through originally. Impact on land, question C, the proposed action may involve construction on land where bedrock is exposed or generally within 5 feet of existing ground surface. He said that the applicant has indicated the NRCS mapping indicates rock between 1 and 3 feet below grade. They assume rock at an average depth of 2 feet below grade. No indication of what type of rock in terms of lead, bedrock, or shale. This will probably have to be removed by non-blasting methods, and we'll have discussed that you're going to be blasting for any rock removal. That's what he provided to me. So the question is, if there's no small impacts that may occur or minor to large impact that may occur regarding the action within 5 feet. The information will be provided.
Do we have any guidance as to what would qualify as a moderate?
You're going to ask me.
Sorry.
A second. And all of this up there, we go, my computer crashed before I got here. We are looking at letter C, which would be E2A. Okay, E2A. Is the average depth of bedrock, is the average depth of bedrock less than 5 feet? Are there bedrock outcroppings? I need to read the questions here. So will there be an impact? Here is the guidance for small and moderate to large impact. I was asked to make it larger.
Okay.
So small impact. And
So what we're concerned about is the nature of that, like what's going to be disturbed. And if it's limestone, it's a karst structure, and there's likely to be caverns under there, it could create unanticipated problems. Stormwater runoff is accounted for, right, in the SWIP?
Yep, and in the design with the retaining pond basins.
No, there's no blasting.
No, blasting, we have agreed there will be no blasting.
Is there anything else?
I don't think we know that there's limestone. It wouldn't be typical.
Don't have to blast, yeah. Well, there's Onondaga limestone, which looks suspiciously like limestone.
Oh.
But I don't think it forms the same
karst structure that you see down the caves.
Are we going to excavate and remove more than 1,000 tons?
Based on the information that Kristen reviewed, I let him redo this, he says that we're looking at 2,150 plus or minus tons.
2,100.
So that's 2.5 tons.
Yeah.
But that's related to mining though. I mean, again, this says this question explores whether mining is proposed to take place. This isn't mining, this is rock removal.
Oh, I see, that's all part of D.
So it wouldn't be that one.
Right, so we're not dealing with mining.
So it wouldn't be mining. This is, I guess, where we would see this kind of play.
It's not being connection.
I'm tending toward small impacts.
Chairman agrees. Chairman?
Yeah, what is going to be done with this spoil? The 2,150
Make some rocks.
out of it?
There was some talk about possibly integrating it into the architecture. Is that still?
Yeah, it's a couple of different things that we've been kind of talking about. Is one, incorporating into the site design. Two, possibly using it as material for the roads, the driveway areas, if that's possible. That's yet to be determined. Obviously, the idea would be to limit the transporting it off-site because there's an additional cost involved with that. But there's a couple of things that make it a little bit tricky. Is that one, we don't know exactly how much rock is ultimately going to be removed. We had to do this based on estimates, and we took, excuse me, they're pretty conservative estimates based on Creighton Manning's evaluation of the site. They wanted to go more towards worst case scenario than best case scenario. So it's a little bit up in the air, but the idea is, I'm really sorry, excuse me. The idea is obviously not to take more than we need to, or remove more than we need to, and to the extent that we need to transport it off the property, it would be to reduce that as well.
And how deep do you need to excavate? And you're not building basements here, you're limited, right?
So,
Most foundations are 5 feet.
yeah, 5 feet is the general understanding, but then the one building, I don't know if you remember, that's kind of like built into the property, so that would require less.
Is there any practice of like pinning to the bedrock, or is that not done?
Usually not.
So you just dig out the rock and build up concrete?
Just to note, I think, for the purposes of this, just consider, for lack of a better, worst case scenario. If they were to truck everything off site with the estimates that we were given, it would be 150 to 175 dump truck loads. As he noted, and I agree, they wouldn't be going onto a state highway, it's not going onto a town road or a county road. State highways are built for this type of thing. So in terms of impact to roads, shouldn't be an impact to the road, but if it was, excuse me, thanks Sean.
Yeah, sorry.
Certainly, the state DOT would make them rebuild that as would the town or county, but state roads are typically built to much higher standard than town or county roads in terms of handling this type of material.
I heard agreement, small.
Yeah, small.
Small impact, okay. And then the next question is related to it. It says the proposed action may involve the excavation and removal of more than 1,000 tons of natural material. We already discussed the amount that being removed and the number of trucks that could require if it were all to be moved off-site. So no small impact or moderate to large impact. It's the same question. Same as,
think it's so large and deep that it's going to upset the aquifer. The amount of hammering that's likely to be done.
I think I saw somewhere in here that was blasting, that could create additional issues.
There will be no blast.
Right, there won't be blasting then. Any thoughts on D?
Well,
Want to go first?
Is construction likely to continue for more than a year or in multiple phases? One phase and less than a year.
The rock portion, rock removal portion will be less than 1 year.
Or small?
I think we got it small.
Okay, so given that, back to this, these are now more small. We had one moderate to large impact that was discussed before, and that would be related to the construction continuing for more than a year. We determined it would be in multiple phases. Still want to keep that as moderate to large impact, or that's okay. So this is where we ended up on item 1. We have one moderate to large impact may occur. We'll have to discuss where we go with that one. So that completes item 1. The next one we have to partially complete is item 3. 2 is done. Item 3 relates to surface water. And item 3, we have 3G and 3K remaining. 3G is asking for proposed action may include construction of one or more outfalls for discharge of wastewater to surface water. And Christian noted the ultimate discharge outfall location along with all required discharge parameters and future monitoring will be subject to New York State DEC review and approval. I can find you to the on the questionnaire if you'd like that as well. There we go. Actually, that's D2DI. Did I miss it? We're looking for relevant part 1 question D2D, which is what these are. I'm just looking for D.
Constructing an outfall into surface water, doesn't this discharge to an intermittent stream?
And it has been determined by DEC after those discussions from before that the stream does connect, so it does have an outfall that continues on. We move past that.
Okay, but that's not the question we're looking for? Or
The only statement is the proposed action may include construction of one or more outfalls for discharge of wastewater to surface water, and asking whether or not there is an impact. I'm just looking for the guidance in D2D. Who's not finding it? Maybe there.
Well, a moderate or severe impact would be a kind of effluent that would harm, disturb the stream, the wetland it enters, and then the stream that goes from that. The function of the DEC through a species permit is to make sure that that doesn't happen. To understand what waters are already there and what kind of effluent is going to be required to make sure that there's no disturbance.
I believe what's involved is the construction of the actual structure of the outfall. which is usually like some sort of like a concrete apron with a pipe coming out of it. So the water spills out on the concrete and runs into the surface water, and it allows a space for someone to come and take a sample so that they can analyze what's coming out of there. And you can imagine, like a big paper mill, they're going to have a pretty substantial outfall. In comparison, this is going to be like a, I don't know, maybe like a sump pump outlet.
It's a very low flow discharge.
Okay, so as far as like the impact of the construction of the outfall, I don't think that it's in itself is going to have anything more than a small impact, as far as this question is concerned.
So it does not appear that we have any guidance from them. I just did a find on the page and there's nothing there.
Okay.
So going to other information that is out there, I pulled this from the materials that have been submitted, and I was talking with Christian. The proposed wastewater treatment facility must comply with all federal and state requirements. The site plan prepared by Creighton Manning shows a discharge pipe to an ACLE wetland intermittent stream located in the middle of the property as a location for the treatment facility outfall. Based on the Dutchess County Department of Health Service sewage flow confirmation letter dated September 5th, 2025, the total daily proposed system flow will be 7,200 gallons per day. This flow rate was deemed acceptable by the county subject to any additional requirements of the New York State DEC. Final approval by the DEC appears to be held up due to lack of secret determination, which is what we're doing now. That's kind of chicken and egg. Any requirements of the DEC will need to be met, and if those result in any changes in the proposed project, might be necessary for the applicant to resubmit plans back to the county health department and potentially the town of Rhinebeck planning board. We're not at that point yet, but that is just kind of stating where we are. So the county has signed off on the sewage flow confirmation letter, which I think they actually reviewed at least twice based on changes to the public space that was in the building, one of those seats. So if that helps, it's not secret guidance, but that's kind of like that.
I'm not seeing a moderate to large impact.
Yeah, I agree, I think it's small.
Okay, so G is small. Letter K, the proposed action may require the construction of new or expansion of existing wastewater treatment facilities. Obviously, the answer to that is yes, we're installing new facilities, so D1A and D2B. Or I think that's D2B.
Jim, I'm sorry, which one are you on?
K, feedback, that was the second one.
So this is the, this is the package plant that we've been discussing, which is like a large rail car or a shipping container size. Prefabricated structures could be plopped down in the middle of the woods.
Yes, so we did get from the applicant this. We did get a visual rendering,
Which the planning board has the authority to require screening of, and not necessarily just vegetative screening.
So, the question is, again, it's impact on surface water. This isn't a visualization question, but certainly that's something we can discuss. But this particular secret question is talking about the impact on surface water.
Okay.
And whether or not, this is a small impact or moderate to large impact. So we have this, we can talk about the screening. I don't think that's what this question is focused on, this question on this. So the analysis comes out to, the questions that are listed up on the screen here, behind me. How much will be disturbed? Will the activities cause erosion? Are they required to file a SWIP? The answer to that is yes. More coastal resources likely to be impacted if erosion takes place. That didn't happen on this site, not in the coastal area. So the small impact and moderate impact examples are on the screen. So we're not in a coastal hazard area, so these, those don't exist. Not a coastal area.
I don't know if this gets too deep into the function of these types of plants, but one of the things that they do is filtration, use clarification filtration, and then there's some disinfection that goes on before the effluent gets discharged to the surface waters. And one of the ways that you can tell that you are doing a good job of disinfecting is there will still be chlorine left in the water when it comes out. If your discharge is, again, over threshold values, which I think are just above where the speedy permit for this project is going to be filed, I think it's just over 10,000 gallons per day, there's a requirement that you not be over-chlorinating the water. And that could have an impact on the surrounding waters if it's a sensitive
Now, some
environment.
systems do not use chlorine. Does your system use chlorine?
I will offer up from our H2M wastewater engineer that this system will utilize ultraviolet disinfection.
That's what I thought.
Okay. So I withdraw the comment.
And totally apart from this, I think the town, maybe the town board could put this together, could use a conference on the whole issue of water and wastewater, where we somehow get the DEC to come here, because what they do is kind of like in a black box, and it's impossible for us to understand it, because it's all about chemistry. And so you say things like the effluent goes into an intermittent stream, and people go, oh my God. I just think that there needs to be a lot more information available to the public on this issue from experts, and where people have a chance to come and ask questions.
Can I just add to that, Edna? I think you might have a hard time getting somebody from DEC to come here, but
I think we go to our state senator and our state assembly person.
Well, I think maybe another easier path to what you're talking about might be so the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, as you know, is the operator of quite a number of these kind of facilities, and you may recall that representatives from that agency came up to speak to the planning board in connection with the Rockledge project, and I think everybody found their presentation to be quite good and really informative about the plan. So that might be a good first place to start, because they were quite cooperative about coming up, and they're probably very familiar with the Swedish regulations, and as operators of the plants, can also answer questions about what the nuts and bolts are of operating the plant and meeting those ongoing standards over the life of the plant.
Maybe this is something the planning board could discuss further after we propose to the town board.
I also think there's an opportunity to talk to them about running a workshop for us.
Yeah.
That doesn't even, by going in that direction, it isn't something the town board has to engage in at all. If we decided we wanted more education in this area, then we could do that and open it up to the public.
That's a great idea.
I think it would achieve the goal you're bringing forward, and you don't have an extra step in there.
Right. Good. Okay.
But back to this one. I think it's small. I don't see we're getting toward moderate to large.
I agree.
I would just say also with regard to that the conclusions are consistent with the approach that the board has taken on other projects, where we realize that we have to place our trust in other government agencies that have regulatory jurisdiction over parts of the project that you're reviewing, and it's typically been the practice of the board in the past to defer to the expertise of the Department of Health or the Department of Environmental Conservation in connection with the areas that they regulate.
And I think Christian Moore had mentioned this at either the previous meeting or the meeting before, that there's a measure of waterways aggregate carrying capacity, something like that. So, it might be fine if everybody is doing the same thing along the line, but there's a threshold limit depending on the size of the stream that we need to be careful of. And that comes up in particular with this waterway because it supports the downstream, the mobile home park, the health center goes to the village. The village discharges into the same waterway, and that ultimately ends up in the Hudson. All along the chain, you know, there's opportunity for contamination. Yeah.
What else?
All right, we're ready to move on. Item number 4, impacts on groundwater. We have 3 items to complete on this one. The first one is 4A. Which is the proposed action may require new water supply wells or create additional demand on supplies from existing water supply wells. Had a lot of discussion on water supply, a lot of comments provided from neighbors. So the question is there no small impact that may occur or moderate to large impact may occur based on the information that have been provided? The question that relates to D2C and impacts. These are moderate to large impacts.
Water testing that was done of the 2 neighboring wells showed there was no negative impact on the use of those neighboring wells from the very high volume withdrawal of water over a period of time. Excuse me. And the other thing is the storage capacity of the hotel for water, so that during peak periods, there's going to be plenty of water and there's no special draw on the well. So I hope it's small.
I wish I knew more about the conditions under which the testing was performed, like the characterization of the neighboring wells, their depth, and what they're, you know, if they're in the same strata that the project is drawing from. There was a pronounced depression in the test well itself that recovered within 48 hours, I think. And then one of the neighboring wells showed about a 9-foot depression. And I didn't see anywhere where this said, you know, this is likely to cause a problem or this is not sustainable. The WSP report is really has a disclaimer at the front of it that basically says, don't use this for any, you know, this is between you and me. This is not for broader consumption. So I don't know why that was put in there, or if that's a typical clause to put in an agreement between, you know, the water, between the engineering firm and their client, because the presumption would be you're going to be using this to go to a town planning board to make the case for the sustainability of your well.
Do you have any idea why that statement would be in the water report from WSP?
No, I don't have an answer to the disclaimer of why they would have put that in there, but I would remind you that the facility itself is not going to draw this intense demand all the time. It will have storage capacity in the hotel, in some of the rooms, some of the mechanical rooms of each building, not the lodging rooms. And on demand, the pump will fill those on off-peak hours. And so when people take showers and run the sinks and shave and flush the toilets, you're not going to have this intense it'll be able to weather those peaks of the morning peak which we traditionally see in any calculation for wastewater.
Do you know what the volume is of the total storage?
That I don't know. I didn't mean to get up into that question. I was just going to add something about the disclaimer. My tendency is to feel that it's boilerplate language that's inserted in most reports. But the other thing I just wanted to note is that with respect to water demand usage, the hotel is not going to be doing on-site laundry. All that's going to be off-site. So just to keep in mind that there are already some business plans to reduce, the draw or the demand on the water resources that are located on the project.
And your landscaping plan is not requiring a great deal of irrigation or watering or any of that?
I don't believe so, and
Not at this time.
yeah, not at this time, and we're obviously, that's a little bit more site plan related, but, we'll be going through that
So
thoroughly
that would be
with the board.
something we'd be looking at then in
Correct.
the future.
Yep.
Jim,
So I was just going to say that any of this question is going to come up. If you click on the parcels around here, a lot of them had well reports. So I did go through and take a look.
I've read them all.
I don't remember, yeah, I read them all. So I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I think the shallowest one might have been 80 feet, and the deepest one were somewhere between 150 to 200, and I think the well for here we're talking about 400 feet.
500.
I can't talk about strata and where things stand, but the depth of this well seems to be nearly twice the depth of the closest depth well. I can't tell you which one was where, but that was generally where I found all the other wells for the reports that were available.
Well, the thing is, this is also a rock substrate, and there are different types of substrate, and if you can imagine a glass of Coca-Cola that you get from the pizza parlor, and they put ice all the way to the top, you're not going to get very much cola in there, and it's not going to take very long if you're drawing from the bottom for that top to drain away. So that's my rudimentary understanding of the basics of this. I understand it's a much more complex network of different systems, some of which are not even related to the ones below them. It's a complicated thing, and I don't want to second guess the professionals who do this every day and didn't express any concern, but they also didn't offer an endorsement, as far as I can tell. And he said this is guaranteed.
Thoughts?
I'm gonna go with small impact, just based on the data at hand. Had there been other tests offered by the neighbors, who did have ample opportunity to pursue their own numbers, and we didn't get that. So going by what's been submitted by the applicant, I would say that's a small impact.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, small.
Okay, so item A has been listed as no or small impact. Item B, water supply demand from the proposed action may exceed safe and sustainable withdrawal capacity rate of the local supply or aquifer. It's tied to A, but it is a separate, different question.
Can you put that on the board?
Yep.
I have to read and listen at the same time.
I just have to move lots of numbers.
And where is it?
We are on this one.
Okay, thanks.
So the relevant part one question, information is the same as what we just reviewed under A. So this is-
I think there's just absolutely no evidence of that. I'd say it's none or small.
That sounds good.
Okay? Go with that.
Number small for item B. Last one we have on question number 4, the proposed action may require the bulk storage of petroleum or chemical products over groundwater or an aquifer. I don't believe it, I don't recall the bulk storage discussion.
I think the reason why we skipped that one was because it had to do with the storing of chemicals related to the sewage treatment.
Which is,
Chlorine and that sort of thing.
right, so
And
that's not relevant.
that's not what they're using.
So then the answer to question F would be no or small impact, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would go with that.
So item 4, impact on groundwater, we found that there is no or small impact may occur on groundwater. The next one we have is item 10, which we have not done. This is related to historic and archaeological resources. Number 1 is asking if the proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to any buildings, archaeological site, or district which is listed in the National or State Register of Historic Places, or that has been determined by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Rec, and Historic Preservation to be eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places. I apologize. We are not actually contiguous to the Hudson River National Historic District. It is further down, one parcel away from this. It's on the other side of it.
Okay.
So there is at least a parcel between this parcel and the national. So we are not immediately contiguous to that district. We did also have a question. I remember that there was a question about something potentially on the site that came from the State Museum, I believe, and we looked into that and found that that was not an issue on the site. I think that's everything I have to offer on that.
So that is none or small.
Okay. Proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites in the State Historic Preservation Office Archaeological Site Inventory.
No.
And the proposed action may occur wholly or partially within, substantially contiguous to an archaeological site not included on the New York State SHPO inventory.
The archaeological
And they-
report that didn't show.
They did a survey, so that satisfies that. They're all none or small. None or small.
So with that, then, we've completed the impact on historic and archaeological resources. We don't have to do E because none of them were answered as moderate to large impact. So for item 10, we would answer that there is no or small impact to occur. Moving on to item 14. This is impact on energy. We needed to do item A, the proposed action will require new or an upgrade to an existing substation. We did receive confirmation in writing that you do not anticipate a new substation or significant upgrade to electrical being required. It would just be typical of commercial use.
That's right.
No, none or small.
No.
Okay. And the proposed action will require the creation or extension of an energy transmission or supply system to serve more than 50 single-family or two-family residences or serve a commercial or industrial use.
No.
The answer is yes, it's serving commercial, but the question is about the impact.
Okay. What do we have for an example for what would be a moderate? Because if they're shooting at 50 families, then kind of close to that as far as the intensity. But anticipate it has something to do with it, changing the caliber of the infrastructure that goes to that location.
Right, it's about energy efficiency primarily.
Yeah, and if this were at the far reaches of a country road, then you would have to add utility poles all the way, and add some cross members and that sort of thing. This area is already intensely served by
Right.
electrical service.
50 families would use far more energy than 60 users of
Yeah. True.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think you have to look at it, again, we may not have a direct correlation between this proposed project and what's listed here, but you have to look at whether or not you think it falls under small commercial uses in a professional office or industrial park, or whether it would fall under moderate to large impact, which is an industrial use on a rural road with electrons, anyway, you can get all this out. Right.
Yeah. I don't think any of the moderate ones apply, so it would be a small impact.
Thank you. Then for 14, that was A. If we go to 14B, Oh, no, we did 14B, so those are both done, so, right, so item 14, impact on energy, no or small impact may occur. And then item 16, we just have one question remaining. And that is letter H. The proposed action may result in the unearthing of solid or hazardous waste.
And there's no evidence that that is the case.
I agree.
If everyone's in agreement, then we would do no small impact for letter H. Then we would find impact on human health to be no or small impact may occur. Based on that, I believe we have completed the part 2, and we had no or small impact will occur for everything except one sub-item. Double checking my notes. Which was impact on land. The board has stated the proposed action may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year or multiple phases, and that was a moderate to large impact. So I guess we have to decide how we would proceed with that.
Jim, is it possible to pull up the examples on that question?
1E?
Yeah.
So these are the analysis questions, and then will there be an impact? This is what we did review before, in terms of small or moderate to large.
It's not multiple phases. Is the activity going to be intermittent?
That's not the plan. I think ideally it would be continuous, and what we had estimated was 18 to 24 months for the entire construction. The reason why I asked Jim to bring this back up because I thought I saw something about fate, that there is about multiple phases over many years should be considered long-term. This would be one phase over more than a year, and we're projecting it to be less than 2.
What would be the noisiest part of the process?
I'm not a contractor, obviously, but my personal opinion would probably be the rock removal. Agreed.
There's going to be a site move.
Rock removal won't be that bad, because it's very soft rock.
But it's noisy. I mean,
It would be, a hammer's noise, but I mean, I think that the majority of the rock would be able to be reused on site. So I think it would be very little.
How long would you anticipate that phase would take?
Well, so that would happen in phases, you know, we'll excavate from one building and go on to the next.
It'll be one of the initial phases. It'll be one of the initial phases of work that we're gonna do, aside from stripping topsoil. So it'll be done early and it will be finished. Once foundations are in the ground, you're gonna hear the hammers and the saws as opposed to the heavy equipment.
You're not doing one building and then moving on to the next. All of your prep work will be done for all buildings at the same time?
Correct. Correct. One might be going up in stages
Yeah.
beyond the other. They'll be in sequence, yes.
But the other thing, the site's gonna be, the construction arena is gonna be over 200 feet back from the road. Because the setback in that zone. So, the noise impact won't be tremendous.
I just want to say about the rock pounding, I live at least a mile away from Locust Hill, and I hear pounding all day long, starting at 7 o'clock. They're still pounding the rock, because that whole hill is a rock ledge.
I mean, this often comes up with issues of blasting. Nobody wants blasting, but it's boom, and then it's done. Then you clear everything, and then maybe you do it again. But the incessant, that ends up being a lot more noisome and distracting.
So I guess one of the questions would be if the board didn't change this to a small, decide not to change it to no or small impact, what would we be looking to do to address the moderate to large impact? And what would the thought process be on how we would address that impact? Does anyone have any thoughts? Or do you want to move it, do you want to change after the discussion of the whole thing to smaller, no impact, no or small impacts?
I'm comfortable with what the applicant just said, in that the most bothersome stage of the work will be handled early on in the project and will be foreshortened. So it's not like they're going to go and do the foundation for this building and then start building it and then go to the next one where, by the tail end of the project, they're still clearing rock. A year and a half in, then that would be a problem. But if they get it all done in a couple of months, that's less of an impact.
I don't do private construction projects, I do a lot of light pedestrian, but typically the mobilization of equipment and manpower is a big expense. So I can't imagine you're going to be looking to come in and clear a little bit, start on this one, then clear another one, and do another one. You're going to generally look to do all of it once the clearing, and then the pouring the foundations, and then as it goes up. I think generally speaking, because that mobilization is expensive to bring all the machinery and take it out, bring it back in.
Right.
Things like that.
Well, certainly what Sharon brought up about workforce housing, but I also had discussions with them that that's exactly the way they're proceeding. And they will be changing contractors on that. They've run in Crew 1, which is doing the removal of the trees and preparation, site preparation.
Right.
But construction people will be in the Crew. I don't know if that's here, but that is how they are maximizing their time and getting certain parts of it done, all of them.
Right, and that project also mobilized just in March.
Yes.
So, that's 2 months and given the scale.
Yeah. Well, we know it's goes along.
That's not for a year and a half.
How about comparison? That's good comparison.
Yeah. Agreed.
There's a lot more rock removal there than ever is going to happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I would be comfortable moving it back. I'm comfortable either way, but I just don't see it rises to moderate to large.
Yeah, and how are they going to mitigate it?
I can't come up with a mitigation, except, a sort of understanding that it's their anticipation that this is all going to take place at the beginning of the project and in as short a period of time as is possible.
And just to also remind the board, you can have it as moderate to large. The question that then comes next is if it's a significant problem. So it might still be a moderate to large, but from your discussions, you might determine that even if it's moderate to large, it's not a significant problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right, and you would do that on part 3.
Oh, okay. So we could leave it at moderate now and deal with it in part 3?
Yes.
Does that work? For me. Okay.
I would just note that in connection with some of the ideas that were just put out there, the applicant is more than willing to entertain, reasonable methods to mitigate any noise and things of that nature during that period of time. And throughout the process, obviously, but the rock removal that we're talking about.
Right. And maybe Sean, you could be looking towards sort of a timeline, something that lays out, I don't want to use phases, because I know we're not talking about phases, but you know what I'm saying. Different components of this, what we think each is going to be, so that clear in our heads.
I think we're also dealing with some very generous assumptions of what the degree of rock removal and disturbance is likely to be. And so chances are good that it's not going to be as bad as we expect.
You're right. Okay.
So, they can say, so it's up to you, but if your client is willing to have you talk to your engineers and maybe come up with a bullet list of the kinds of things that your client's willing to do to mitigate that impact, if you were to provide that to the board prior to the discussion about a part 3, that would assist the board in making the part 3 determination about the significance of that particular identified mother to Lloyd Jim back.
Next, so, I started drafting what I think will eventually become the part 3 based on the discussion, so I pulled all the information that I had. I'll need to go through and update some of that, pull in some of the discussions we've had, conversations we've had, I have some notes on that, and provide to you, send over to John and Kim to take a look at before we do that. Essentially a part 3 write-up of exactly kind of where we stand, the information that we use that would match the part 2. And I can do that for the board.
And that for the next meeting?
I will do my best. It's a
The
lot.
next meeting being June 1st or June 15th?
I can turn around in 2 weeks, but yeah, I need to get signed, I need you guys to look at it. So I need to do it, I need you guys to look at it.
Yeah, then we usually circulate it to the board and we post it on the website. It might be, I don't know, I would think the June 15th might be more reasonable.
It doesn't sound to me like there's a guarantee that he can complete it and you can review it.
Well, also, it's the logistics for circulations and, posting. That's just my outlook on it.
I would agree, yeah. So we're,
Going up. Is this to go out a month? Yes, okay.
At least for the part 3, whether
Part
there's
three.
other things you could do at the.
And I give Jim a chance to prepare it and grant Lions an opportunity to
circulate
review
it
it.
to us
And-
and make it public.
Yes.
Obviously goes to the applicant as well. Is there anything that can be done in 2 weeks? Jim has just offered the suggestion that if there was anything else we need to tidy up in 2 weeks, it's still work for the part 3 in a month. I don't.
Can we continue a site plan review while we're finishing up secret? Part 3? Or should we wait? I mean, we've got the part 2 complete.
I mean, I think we could start this, what do you think, then? Think we could start discussions on site plan review and part 3? I don't
You
think.
start,
I mean, the word wouldn't be finishing site plan, but
Oh, no,
only
no, no,
discussions
no.
on
Yeah,
it.
I mean, we've got to do, yeah, we've got to do
Discussions
this.
as part of the open meeting.
We'll be getting into some of the details we've discussed, like we talked about screening earlier of the waste treatment units, things like
But
that.
it's subject to changing,
Right, obviously. But I think because we only have the one moderate impact, the part 3 will match this. I think we can probably have a discussion about that while we're, so it's up to the board.
It works for me. Applicant, Tom?
That if we, what I'm hearing is that we would be able to potentially move forward with site plan aspect of things June 1st. That would be welcomed by the applicant and appreciated.
And then we're not putting pressure on Jim and everybody else to get the other part done until the second meeting in June.
Understood.
All right, I'll need a complex motion here. Oh, wait, okay.
Well, why don't we take the motion one at a time? I think that would be easier.
All right,
Okay.
but before we do that, it's still open as a public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take a motion just, on the seeker stuff, while it's fresh in everybody's
Okay,
head.
well,
we can
you've
do
got
that,
this
and then move
draft
on to
secret
public
resolution
hearing.
here before us, so
Somewhere in my file.
I have it right here. Here.
That's it, Jim. Just a second, bring it up on the screen.
So we're going to do part 3 first, or?
Yes. Yeah, because this is the whole thing, yeah. All right.
Okay, so we can't do that. We don't have part 3, so we can't do the draft secret tonight.
We're not gonna, but you're giving direction to Jim to draft up the.
Okay, so we need a motion to direct Jim to
Draft the part 3.
draft the part 3.
Based on the EAF part 2 discussions at tonight's meeting.
Have a motion to that.
I would like that. I move that we do it.
Oh, is
I
that
will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Finished drafting, it's already 49 pages. So
Okay.
I will work on.
All the more reason to push it, to do the right.
Okay, then the second motion is to,
Well, I think the second motion is to schedule the next meeting for June 1st for preliminary discussions
Oh, the site plan.
Correct.
I move that we do
I
that.
guess that would.
And a second?
Second.
Favor?
Rather than put everything together. People want to.
Public comment? Correct? Sure, I'll entertain public comment.
Hi, Mark Weeder, 58 Levin Lane. Before I go into what I've written here, and you'll excuse me for reading it after, just a couple of comments. There was a comment about the potential contamination. I believe if you check all the documents that have been submitted to you, you will find that the lot that we're talking about is mentioned in the environmental concerns. So I beg you to please review that again. I think you'll see that lots in there. As far as addressing the wells, we've said this before. It was a stranger coming to us, asking to test our wells, giving us no reason, and saying that we have no recourse if they were to do any damage to our property or our wells. So I don't think there's anyone on the board that would have accepted that and said, sure, come test our well. So that being said, excuse me for reading this because I don't want to miss anything that I wanted to say. First, I want to begin by thanking the planning board for the time and effort you have put into reviewing this project. I recognize that your responsibility is not only to consider development, but to also protect the surrounding community and the environment for the long term. With that in mind, I respectfully ask the board to require 3 additional safeguards before moving this project forward. First, there should be additional independent testing to ensure that this project will not have a long-term impact on neighboring wells and groundwater. Once groundwater is damaged, the consequences can be extremely difficult and sometimes impossible to reverse. If the event that results are unclear as to the long-term impact to neighboring wells, the developer should be required to place a sizable sum in escrow for a number of years to cover the potential cost to the neighbors. Second, the wastewater treatment facility should be located closer to the hotel itself where it can be easily monitored, maintained, and quickly accessed in the event of malfunction or emergency. Critical infrastructure should not be hidden away from visibility or oversight. Third, the developer should be required to conduct comprehensive environmental testing of the soil and water across the entire property to determine whether any contamination exists that could affect neighboring properties, residents, or future guests. A number of times at these meetings, I have heard concern about the cost to the developer to do additional testing. I have represented many developers over my career, and that is just the cost of doing business and building a quality development. These costs are a mere pittance to the possible cost to the neighbors for having to drill new or deeper wells, or for having contaminated soil and or drinking water. These are not unreasonable requests. These are common sense protections intended to safeguard the public health, the environment, and the neighboring community for years to come. Thank you.
Christopher Capo, 22 Kennedy Lane. I want to clarify one thing with the board, if I might. I sent in 2 separate submissions to the planning board, one on April 1st and another one on April 16th. The one on April 16th included some attachments of independent consultants that I retained myself to provide additional information to the board about some of the points that have been personally concerning to me and my neighboring property to the project. Those were sent in via email. Gretchen, the board secretary, had confirmed that they were received and sent on to the planning board. I would just like confirmation that those materials are part of the public record and that they are being considered by this process as you guys go through both secret and project review. And if the answer is no, I'd like respectfully request a written answer as to why those materials are not being considered.
Well, if they're received by Gretchen, they're part of the public record. So the answer to that is yes, they are part of the public record.
Okay, so the part of the public record, are they being considered as part of your proceedings? Are they being reviewed? Are they being discussed? Are they being looked at?
I certainly read them.
I have reviewed them.
We have all, I believe, received them and reviewed them. And I can only say that personally, when I read those, I take them into my consideration as I'm looking at all the questions and as we move through that. I take anything that's submitted by community members as something that we need to look at.
Okay, very good, thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention, which Mr. Weir already mentioned, I'm confused by the treatment of the letter that was submitted to the board from Nancy Shomo about contamination on the site. That letter, which I also did submit as part of my submission, clearly indicates the parcel number of this project's parcel at the very top of the letter, and in the closing of the letter, the representative from the Board of Health who sent the letter to DEC said very clearly, additional review and remediation may be required before any residential construction occurs on these parcels, plural. And that was one of the parcels. Yet earlier in this meeting, it was pretty clear that the board had elected to either ignore or discount that letter because you came to the conclusion that there is no need to investigate any further contamination issues on that parcel. So could we have some clarification about that, please?
I think the board is compelled to consider all the facts that are put before it, but the board is under no obligation to engage in speculative assumptions. And I think that we've given proper weight to the facts that have been presented. But a letter that's more than 20 years old that alludes to the possibility of contamination for which there's no further evidence seems to be less compelling.
Okay, I would suggest that the board review that letter again, because the letter indicated that there was evidence of contamination and that additional analysis and remediation would be required. Additionally, if the board recalls, we had a neighbor, Jeff Carter, testify with firsthand experience that the Pitcher family was using that parcel as a dumping ground. Okay, so you've got fairly compelling evidence, in my view, that could inform your review and decisions in this matter, yet it seems that you continuously look for reasons to discount it.
Well, I just, from my own perspective, I also noted that on the archaeologist's report, there's a note that there's a push pile on the northwest corner of the parcel. And that would indicate, that would be consistent with something being covered up with a bulldozer or something like that.
Okay.
But that's a fact that just kind of exists in isolation. There's nothing else to tie it to, a pattern where we see it showing up in the water. We know what these contaminants are. I mean, his allegation was that it was mercury.
And lead.
And lead. And those are very important things that are easily tested for. And I didn't see any tests that indicated that there's an elevated lead level in anybody's water that's due to the activity on this site. Or that the development of this site is going to increase the amount of lead that would be.
That's an untested hypothesis. Respectfully, if there is evidence of contamination on the site, which is documented in this letter, with no follow-up, no remediation, then the hypothesis that will indicate that there shall be no further contamination of any groundwater is illogical.
Okay, I don't see where there's the evidence of contamination. Like I said, there are things that make me suspicious, and my suspicions have not been satisfied by any fact pattern that's been presented.
Okay, so the letter from 2004 is going to be effectively ignored?
Not ignored. I think it's put in a larger context.
Okay.
So,
All right, and then the other just minor question that I have from the discussion tonight, it gets a little confusing because some questions get asked to the developer about some of the characteristics of the project, and it almost seems like, you know, they really don't know some of these answers because the project hasn't been built yet. So some very simple things, like there's mention of 5-foot deep basements, yet in the same context there was mention of a requirement to have retained water for pressurization for water supply for these rooms in a mechanical room, okay? So in a 5-foot basement, where's the mechanical room going to go? What about firefighting water retention? That hasn't even been discussed yet, right? So there's another demand to have on-site water storage in the event of firefighting. That hasn't been discussed, nor any placement of that, any required excavation, you know. Again, I guess all this stuff's supposed to fit in within a 5-foot basement area, and that passes the test of the board.
I don't know that it's part of seeker.
It has to do
Yeah,
with
I would say
excavation.
that those are issues that are more appropriate to be considered during the site plan portion of the review.
Which is coming up.
That's fine, but, you know, we're talking about excavation, rock removal, things like that. I mean, it's all directly connected to that.
It will be part of the site plan review.
So excavation is not part of the secret review?
No, excavation is, and information was received from the applicant, which was reviewed by the board's consulting engineer with regard to excavation volumes to be able to answer the questions in the EAF.
And those excavation volumes were unaware of where the placement of this water retention facility would be?
Well, that's not typical, that's not within the scope of the question that is being asked for the environmental assessment form.
Okay. I mean, it seems to be an important characteristic of the development.
It may be important with regard to site plan review, which goes to the built, in other words, the review of site plan review goes to the built site. The seeker review, which takes place at the very beginning of the process, has to do more with the environmental impacts as keyed from the environmental assessment form.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to belabor the point, but it seems to me that not knowing what my basement profile is when we're having a discussion about excavation seems illogical.
Well, I think that there's an understanding. So one of the reasons that the secret review is supposed to take place at the beginning of the process is so that there's an assessment of environmental impacts at the earliest possible juncture, but there's also an understanding that at that juncture in the process, there isn't going to be granular knowledge about how the project's going to be constructed, because it's envisioned that the secret process can prompt significant changes in design that are done to address issues that are raised during the environmental review.
Okay, fair enough. I'll look forward to those requested changes.
Okay, and I believe, the public hearing will remain open during the site plan portion of the review, and please raise the issue again.
Like I said, I've made 2 significant submissions, one on April 1st, one on April 16th, at my own expense, by the way, and we're talking thousands of dollars, okay? So I am taking this extremely seriously, and I'm just asking the board to likewise take that seriously.
Okay. I appreciate that, and I thank you for your input. I can assure you, in addition to the board members, I've looked through the materials that you submitted. I've gone through the entirety of the materials that were submitted by Mr. Carter as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hello again, Catherine Clark, 60 Lincoln Lane. And I just have a couple of clarifying questions. As a follow-on, I looked through the material that was submitted by Chris, by Mr. Capo, and it sounds to me, I mean, is it in your purview to ask the applicant to move the wastewater treatment plant?
We could ask.
Well, you have to approve the plan, so you can, I mean, I'm basing part of my questions on the way the discussion went with the 308 project, in which case it seems like lots of things can be moved around and changed, and that's part of your process. So I'm just, would that discussion then occur during the site plan review? I thought in the material that he submitted, there was a number of legitimate reasons about why that might be moved.
For the conservation, you're talking about Mr. Buzzles?
Yes, I'm just saying, in listening to any number of applications that come before this board, your authority to ask for changes seems to be pretty broad.
It generally is. In this case, it is also tied to the DEC, because the DEC is going to permit the South Hall location, and the unit itself, they're going to be the ones overseeing it, so there's a coordination effort there. And so we can ask and talk about it, but we're also going to have to see what we get back from the DEC in terms of their comments and questions. I don't think we've received anything yet specific to that.
So would a more in-depth discussion around the location of that happen in the site plan review? Or if you, in this discussion, as you go through the secret process, is that done?
I think board's prerogative.
It's one of the things that's been, pieces of information that's been submitted that if the public discussion is where you deliberate and make decisions and you ask the applicant for other information and there hasn't been any public discussions on this point, which we feel has had a lot of validity in some of the arguments about why it might be better to move it, then I'm just trying to find out when would that happen? Or is it just not going to happen? I mean, that's, you know. So this second part of my question kind of relates to that. And I've brought this up a number of times and I'll quit bringing it up. But on the other part of the parcel map, it says future development. And there's never any discussion about that. It's like, does that just get changed to no future development because we didn't discuss it at all? And we don't have any idea what that might be? Because otherwise I feel like that's a huge miss and a problem in this application going forward. It's just like a big blank, oh, we're going to do something in the future. And it seems like it has to be part and parcel of this discussion, or like putting aside the land on 308, and I know these are two totally different projects, but on one of them, he's going to put aside 65 acres to not be used, whether it's in a conservancy or whether, you know, it's just for the people who buy those houses. And in this, we seem to be okay with future development, unnamed, unspecified.
Where is that, Catherine?
On their site, you know.
On the site plan?
On their site plan, on the map.
And if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. So that notation was actually asked to be put on by the board. That wasn't something that the applicant came up with.
So then you have said that before, Sean.
Yeah.
So then I would just ask if that's true, maybe the board could just say, take that off.
Number two, with respect to the wastewater treatment plant, that's been the topic of discussion from the outset, the location. That was one of the first issues that Mr. Capo commented on, and he's been coming regularly to the meetings.
Yep.
And the explanation that we provided time and time again is that the location is determined by a function of, one, what Jim has touched on with respect to the discharge point, but also because of the wetlands that exist on the property. This is a location that would not interfere with any wetlands and things of that nature, and there's public policy that's in favor of protecting wetlands.
Are there wetlands beyond your hotel? There are no wetlands beyond your hotel, and closer to Middle Road, which gives you access for emergencies. So let's not make up stories.
If you want to speak, just please come to the mic so you can get.
Yeah, I mean,
Right, there's no wetlands, there's no wetlands behind your hotel over here. You have emergency access right here if there's an emergency. And as we know with waste
That's not where the
treatment,
emergency access is.
it could be.
It's
How
not,
are you
but it's
getting,
not there.
how are you getting here? How are you getting here in an emergency? Okay, how are you monitoring this over here? Why don't you want it in your backyard, but you want it in our backyard? What's the reason behind it? Okay, you can run off, the runoff is here too.
I gave you the reason.
But your reason's
There are
not
no
valid.
wetlands where you're saying.
But there's a reason.
There's no reason to argue.
But it's not valid.
Public comment.
This is public comment.
Not for cross-examination. And this is, I think, the wetland buffer here, is a wetland, but
Right.
delineated wetland.
This is the hotel. We're saying, put it here. Put it here.
Okay, that's more.
Put it off the middle road.
More wetland.
All right.
I think that, in the submission of Mr. Capo, if I read it correctly, part of it was provided by an engineer who looked at the site plan map and who considered those things in their suggestions. So I don't think that it's totally out of hand to ask for a discussion on that is maybe in more depth. The other thing about the no development, and I'm not at all trying to be, I don't, cheeky about it. It's like if the client says, if the applicant says that the board asked for it to say future development, and the board has no memory of that, and you're not considering any future development now because there hasn't been any identified, and you don't want to separate these things, whatever that term is that you're not supposed to do, then you could, thank you, then you could just say that part of the map should say no future development. And I think that should be discussed. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
I'm Melissa Schultz. I live at 39 Hook Road. And I have first of all, I want to thank all of you. I know it's late. I know this is not a paid role, so thank you all so much for what you do. I have a question, Craig. When you say you're suspicious about hazardous materials, and you said that today.
I said the push pile made me suspicious.
Okay, so that makes you suspicious. Why
Something
not?
covered up.
And I'm suspicious too about something covered up. And I have a neighbor who came here a couple of months ago and said there is lead in her water. And we have that paperwork. And I do beg of you to go back to that paperwork and look at those parcel numbers, because I heard information here that's different than what I saw with my own eyes. But if you're suspicious about that push pile, what's the downside in doing additional testing? Right? What's the downside in having the developer do additional testing to ensure that people like me with kids running around in my backyard is not going to be contaminated when that stuff is stirred up? What's the downside?
I don't believe there's anything in our authority that allows us to compel that.
Okay, and that's good information for me. So the planning board can't ask the developer to do additional testing?
Compel that.
You cannot.
We have before asked about additional water testing. These things have come up at the planning board level. It is up to the applicant, and the applicant has in those occasions said that they're not willing to entertain that. So it's not, I mean, we can't make them.
So let me make sure I got this straight. You would like them to
I
do
didn't say
additional, okay. That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is the downside in asking them to do additional testing?
The board has to make a decision about, the board has the authority to require further study. That's, if they were to issue a positive declaration and require an environmental impact statement, they could require the applicant to do additional study. The issue is, that Craig alluded to, is that the board has to make a decision about the facts and the information that's before the board, and whether that information persuades them that there's a moderate to large impact that is significant that's going to require further study. And the board members make a judgment on those things based on the information that's in front of them. And there's a lot of information that the board's taken in so far. with regard to those issues, and there is some information about potential contamination, and at the same time, no other government agency that was around the proposals for development of these parcels, in particular DEC, who has the main jurisdiction with regard to solid waste, ever took any action to identify a site, to require remediation. There's no...
I'll tell you why that is. I'll tell you why that is. The guy who was pushing for it, Nancy's husband, died. He was the one leading the charge. So he never advocated for the DEC to come back and do additional testing, and it was buried, literally and figuratively.
Well, in my experience, and I did do, early in my career, I did a lot of work with regard to Superfund sites. In my experience, if the DEC perceives that there's a significant threat to human health from a particular site, they will exercise control over that, require remediation to certain standards, and in some cases they'll also require deed restrictions to be able to protect future users of the site going forward. We don't have any of those measures in place.
And I think that's because not enough testing was done. So, okay, I hear you, that's your judgment, but can we talk then about additional testing?
I just want to say, that's not a judgment, that's a fact that the board's relying on, that there isn't an enforcement action, remediation plan, or spill or cleanup site designation that's been given in this area by the DEC.
Okay. Can we also talk, though, about the water testing? Because I feel like this comes up at every single meeting, and we go around in circles. By the way, just for the record, Sean, I never got a letter to have my well tested.
What's your address?
39 Hook Road. My neighbor at 41 didn't get a letter. Jeff Carter, I don't know, maybe he's 35.
Jeff Carter's on the list, and he did get a letter, and he got a letter at the address that he claims that he lives at in Barrytown or Barrytown.
I never got a letter. No one knocked on my door.
I can verify if the letter went to you or not.
Can we just make, this is again a public hearing.
Okay, I never got a letter to have my well tested. I never had someone knock on my door. My husband and I work from home. I never saw a WSP or heard of them. We had a discussion where someone on the board, I believe it was Delise, said, why not do some more well testing? And a bunch of us said, yeah, let's do some more well testing to ensure that, so we feel better. I mean, the question about 72-hour test versus a longer-term test, which is why I'm a big proponent of putting money in escrow, which I understand planning boards make that decision in other places. Why can't we have a developer put money in escrow? I'm not against this problem.
It's not done in this kind of context where you're putting money in escrow as a guard against future liability.
It's not future liability. I mean, so it's never been done to put money in escrow to ensure that if any neighbor has a problem with their well, the developer would remediate that?
Not in my experience.
Okay. I read about, maybe it's not done here, maybe it's never been done in Rhinebeck, but I think it's been done before, no?
Well, I have wider experience than just Rhinebeck, but if you know of an instance where that's happened, please let me know about it.
Okay, I will do more research on that, John, thank you. But it is interesting to me that it came up that we need more well testing, and I think Sean said, why should we pay for that? And Delisa's point was, you supposedly sent letters out to all the neighbors to do well testing. So if you were going to pay for it back then, why wouldn't you pay for it now? And it feels like we don't get answers on these things. We just, each board meeting, it's like the same things come up. I just want some clarity. I got more clarity today. I heard you, John, on the contamination, and Craig, but what about the wells? If we want more testing, it sounded like at one point you believed we should do more well testing. Did I misunderstand that?
We're here to hear your comments. I don't think the rest of this evening we want to keep going back and forth. We have other business. I appreciate everything, but I don't think we're going to be able to answer all the questions today.
Okay, that's really my only question. is-
Okay.
Well, I would just say to you, sorry Melody, but just that I think the board's been actively considering the issue, and there was a lot of, like I said, there have been many discussions, there was lots of information received, and there comes a point where they have to make a judgment as a board, whether they're, again, whether they're going to require that additional,
But it
that those
sounds-
additional steps be taken.
You did make a decision a few months ago about, yeah, we could do more well
We
testing.
didn't make a decision. There was,
Okay.
you know, there
I
was-
think at that time, somebody was asked to solicit and to find out whether, Catherine, whether there was,
volunteered.
there would be interest, because the board was concerned about whether there'd be sufficient participation if it was something that the board decided to make a decision about requiring. And I think that that's as far as it went.
My
at the time.
recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Catherine volunteered to reach out to the neighbors and identify who among them who had not participated in the past, for whatever reason, were interested in proceeding. I believe it was a limited number of people.
Five people. And
So that did not indicate to us at the time that there were many, many neighbors who were at this point saying, yes, 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 I want this.
But also, I think that question to the neighbors was in the context of if the applicant is willing to do more testing,
Would you agree to?
are there people in the neighborhood willing to be tested, right? And the applicant is not willing to do more testing. The cost is, as I understand it, is not merely a continuation of the testing. It's starting all over. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. It's the major pumping operation that involves the cost.
So then the answer is no, you're not going to require them to do any more. I just want an answer, right? Is it yes or is it no? So it sounds like, Edna, from what you're saying, it's a no then. You're not going to require them to do more well testing. Is that correct?
I would need some additional information based on what I have heard so far. I don't think more well testing should be mandated.
And the board made that decision tonight as part of the FEAF Part 2 and the impacts on groundwater.
Okay, so then there is an answer. You're not willing to ask them to do more well tests, or the board is not asking them to do more well tests?
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, I think we've already done the motions, is that correct?
We haven't done a motion for the public hearing. If you want to continue the public hearing.
I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing. And the first meeting that will be back with you is in 2 weeks.
Thank you very
So
much.
we'll continue.
So the public hearing is June 1st?
Or the 15th.
June 1st was the site plan review, the 15th would be secret.
You can do, if you want to continue
We wanted
it.
the month to do the secret.
Yeah,
So
I
let's go,
understand that, but
let's
if you
go,
want to do.
continue the public hearing to the second meeting in June.
Okay,
Is that agreeable to everybody? Good. Yes, may I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
No, I didn't say thank you for all those that were here, and thank you especially for having that on. Thank you very much for your
We have 2 other items of business this evening. One is the old business, that is Mary Kelly Swiss, Agricultural Road, site plan review, construction of a single-family dwelling, covered terrace, and ground family fence.
Hi, so last we left off, I think we're really near the end. We had 2 items left. We had a sign-off letter from CPL, was that received?
So Christian had a couple minor comments. I think that they're just technicalities, that if anything goes in the condition, it's nothing that would change the plans, it's just something developing. So I think that's.
So that could be like a condition of approval?
I think that's just some calculations in there, so I don't anticipate.
All right, and that's kind of where we are with Brian as well. We are substantially agreeing on the path forward, which is that essentially the abandoned driveway will get remediated according to the Hudsonia recommendations for replanting. There's no issue there, we're kind of all on the same page with that. In terms of tying up everything with a bow, there was a request for a remediation plan. We submitted Appendix I in February 14th of '24.
Which was before the Hudsonia report.
Correct, but it was a survey of all of the trees throughout the whole property that were cut down. It has the caliber of each tree, it has the location, and so Brian wrote a report which essentially we agree with, but the way the language is written, it says that all of the clearing will be remediated according to the Hudsonia report. And obviously that's not realistic because most of the clearing that took place was for the house and the septic. And so what we're really talking about is the remediation of the driveway, which is no longer going to be a driveway. So I'm looking for help for how to just tie this up and say we agree. Like there's no issue with the substance of how to move forward. But you know, this is obviously year 3. My clients bought this property when their daughter was 2 in order to move her into Rhinebeck schools, and now she's 8. So it's creating a lot of heartache, and I appreciate that we closed the public hearing at the last meeting, but being that there's 62 days to close it out since the public hearing closed, and Brian is part-time and seems pretty maxed out. He emailed me today, we're communicating, but we're you know, I don't think there's any issues left. I'm just looking for help of like, look, we're gonna do the right thing. I think we've agreed on, we've at exhaustion reviewed every aspect of this project, and so how can we tie this up and bring this to a close?
Okay, I have a suggestion about this.
Oh, sure.
So I spoke, just wanted to let you know, I've been having trouble reaching Eric, but I talked to him today.
Okay.
And I expect to be able to fill in that blank in the letter that's in Brian's report with.
For the escrow?
For the
okay.
estimate.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the next few days. So
okay.
We'll let you know about that. Then and as you mentioned, CPL has already commented, and I agree that I think that whatever open items there are on that can be handled as conditions on site plan approval. So the only thing would be left is figuring out between you and Brian whether there are going to be agreed changes to the settlement letter. And I don't know, when we talked to Brian afterward, he indicated that it would be helpful if there was something in writing from your clients that specified if they want changes to write those out so that he can consider them. But otherwise, the only thing that needs to be done once that's finalized is for your clients to sign it, and then the board will be ready. You should know that that a planning board resolution approving the site plan is drafted, and we have some final changes to make, but they're not extensive, and so they should be made in short order. So the board would be, if your clients sign that letter prior to the next meeting, I believe the board would be poised to take a vote on approving the site plan at the next planning board meeting.
Okay. We spoke to Brian on Friday and followed up within, I mean, his hours are limited. I understand he's under strain because he's not really in this position anymore. And so we spoke to him around 11 o'clock. He said I was going to leave around 12. Before 12 o'clock, sent him a response. I think we're all on the same page. My concern is just how can I help get this to the finish line, because there's really not more to discuss. It's just a matter of tying up essentially the document, and the request for a remediation plan by another party, like a landscape architect or an arborist. That work has already been done in Appendix I.
Well, Appendix I doesn't address some of the other, I mean, I haven't gone through it to see if it exactly addresses the Hudsonia report. We mentioned the timing, it was generated prior to. It's plotted on a Marie Welch survey. There's nothing on there that indicates who did the vegetation part of the plan. I think you guys have Labella as a consultant, and they have landscape architects on staff that would be able to put together the kind of plan that the board's looking.
So what we're looking at is Appendix I quantifies how many trees were taken down and what caliber they were in the abandoned driveway location. The Hudsonia report in Table 2 quantifies per each caliber of tree how many trees need to be replaced. So there's not another level of review or documentation that needs to really happen other than tying these two documents together. We're saying, we agree, we will put back every tree in the driveway location according to the Hudsonia recommendations. And we will pay the escrow that the board recommends, and we can tie that up and be out of here. But I don't think at this point we have to go back and do another drawing or have another consultant or do anything, because the information is there.
Have you submitted, the last, I too spoke to Brian.
Yes.
And what he imparted to me was that we had a good conversation, that he had ended the conversation asking to receive in writing the parts of this conversation that you needed to work together. He wanted something in writing saying, this is what we are, I'm using the word objecting to, and I don't mean it to be negative. These are the things that we, the applicant, would like to see changed to move this along, and then he receives that, he reviews it, and then he makes the decision. This is really not, and we can go back to Brian and say, where are you? Do you have everything you need? But it's really his call in the end. So he implied to me he was still waiting for something in writing. Maybe it happened after he left that day. I can't answer that.
So the answer?
I just want to add that Appendix I doesn't address the stone walls, which
No, it
was
doesn't.
included in the TAM settlement.
So we responded to Brian on Friday. We spoke to Brian on Friday, responded to Brian on Friday. I also got an email from him today, responded to him today. So it's in community. As far as I know, it's all clear. It's all tied up. I mean,
as soon as he lifts it, we're on.
Well, and the way we lift it is to have your clients sign the settlement agreement, and if you need changes to the settlement agreement, that's what we're trying to get, so that we have an agreed upon term. So if there's questions, and like if you don't want to have, the arborist or landscape architect, provide that so that we can review it, or say we're submitting Appendix I as our remediation plan, so that the board has direction, and it's now in the settlement agreement as to what you're suggesting, and then that can be reviewed by the board. Does that make? I think that's what we're saying.
Absolutely, we're on the same page, and I
think what we just want to make sure that we have, so that when you sign off on the settlement agreement, that's going to be part of the record. That's going to be part of the resolution as part of the conditions. But we need to have something rather than emails back and forth or conversations. We need to have something in writing. So if you are submitting Appendix I as your remediation plan, let us know that, and then we can consider to see if that is addressing the concerns that need to be addressed.
Brian decides that.
Right, yes.
Not us.
Yes.
Just
Would it be helpful, Kim or John, if you're involved in that process, can we CC you on that communication? I mean, are you assisting Brian? It's hard because Brian's not here, and he's. I understand from his.
Brian asks us questions when he has questions, so if you want to copy us, you can.
All right.
And Brian.
And it might make things faster.
I would love to do that. We'll bring you up to speed. We'll copy you on the communication, and if it's acceptable to actually redline his letter, then we will.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Anything you can
We will
do
do
like
that.
that. We are anxious, I can assure you, we are very anxious to move this along.
Thank you.
Move this to a point where it can be disposed of.
Yeah, and like, if, you know, think of it in terms of, in moving forward, the next step is to just get agreement on the settlement terms and get a signed
Okay.
settlement.
Do you have a sense what the escrow is? Is
I
that?
have no idea.
I think that's
And
what.
I don't want to
that's
give
what
you,
John-
I don't want to give you a ballpark number.
Okay,
I
fair
think
enough.
so. But we'll have it soon. We'll have it soon. And as I said, you can tell your clients, we're putting the other pieces together. We're already, the resolution's 90% done, and CPL is taken care of, so like you said, we're right on the doorstep here.
All right. So, 2 weeks?
Yeah, just keep us updated on
Yes,
how it goes.
I will, we'll CC you on the communication, and
Yeah,
I think we're
we-
right there at the end. It's like more of an administrative task at this point.
Yeah, and remember, it takes us a while to get to Brian also, because
Yeah.
he's very involved in his other life now, so.
But he is, I will say, you know, he's gotten back to all of us. He's
Yes, he
trying to
has.
keep us
He's
in
been
the loop.
great.
He reported that you've had good conversation, so, you know, he's being as responsive, he's going beyond being responsible and trying to bring this to closure as well. So could I have a motion to schedule this under old business in 2 weeks, which would be June 1st?
So
Yes.
moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to sit through all this other stuff to get to.
Well, it's been 3 years, so what's another meeting? See you in 2 weeks.
It's longer. The last bit of business for this evening is a time extension request from Rockledge.
Yes, Rockledge is asking for another timeline extension. At the January 6th planning board meeting, the board agreed to grant a 6-month extension for the satisfaction of conditions and requirements set forth in the approval resolution for site plan approval and minor subdivision approval that was granted on June 16th, 2025. That extended it to June 16th, 2026. At that time, the special permit wasn't expiring, and the wetlands permit is still valid until June 16th, 2028. We got a bunch of different timelines going here, but essentially they need another 6-month extension. They're apparently working forward, moving forward on things, but they haven't come back to Melanie for signature.
I move that we give them a 6-month extension, and I also want to comment that I am no longer recused from this since it's been approved by the planning board.
So this will be for site plan, special use permit, and minor subdivision until December 16th, 2026. No need to do the wetlands permit because it's good as as far as I know.
So moved.
Second.
Well, it's
I
not
will-
recused, so we wouldn't have a quorum.
I also would like to, in communicating this information to them, to ask them to give us an update on where they are in their review process with DEC. Because I think that is still, they're still moving through that, which may be part of the reason they're asking for this extension. But I think it's time we ask for an update on the status of that, so,
Gretchen, that's a point before you adjourn.
yes.
The new motion for grammaticus for the 15th instead of the 1st.
Could we have a motion to correct the
Thank you.
motion we made earlier for grammaticus, which was originally June 1st, and it really should be June 20th. 15th. 15th.
We want to try for a third one.
Going from the 1st
To the 15th.
to the 15th.
This
Got
is
it.
for who?
Grammaticus.
This is the Hook Road.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
We did the wrong date.
We got a motion,
Second that motion.
second.
Or I
All those
will
in favor?
vote in favor of that motion.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries.
It helps me because I can send this email.
I don't want to get it. Not yet.
We have adjourned. I didn't want to.
Will we get adjourned, Melanie?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Second. Done. All those in favor? Adjourn.
Aye.
Yes, done.
I don't have anything.